I would like to call to order the July 8th, 2021 City of Southport Monthly Board of Aldermen meeting. I want to welcome everyone tonight. It's nice to see such a good crowd. Must be something on the agenda tonight, so I'm pleased to have you here. Hope everyone still feels the glow of July 4th. It was a wonderful celebration, and keep it all month and all year, hopefully. Although it looks a little rough right now, I'm still grateful Elsa didn't do too much damage to us. We're all grateful for that. I know you are. So we're very pleased. For our invocation, I will call on Reverend Lowe Davis. This will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Let us pray. Most gracious and loving God, we praise you and thank you for all the blessings that you have bestowed upon Southport, upon all who live here, all who work here, all who visit here. And we ask that we be guided by your Holy Spirit to make good and right decisions tonight for the benefit of Southport. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Davis, and we will call on the Holy Spirit to guide us, so thank you for that. Next item is public comment. If you're here to comment on the text amendment, if you would, on short-term rentals, if you would do so at the public hearing, you'll have an opportunity to do it then. And that's we're going to move that to item 1 on the agenda, so we're going to move that up, and we'll take care of that in just a couple of minutes. Madam Clerk, is there anyone here for public comment?
Yes, sir. We have 2 speakers. The first is Mary, I'm sorry, but I cannot read the last name, from 306 Henning Drive.
If you would just cut on your microphone, state your name and your address.
I'm Mary Friend at 306 Herring Drive. Sorry about my writing. No, I'm here to talk about the utilities and the service here. I made a list of, well, it's 2-part. One, our street got omitted from the having our recycle dumped Tuesday before July 4th, and I apologize, I'm not good at this. Thursday I called City Hall to say our whole street had been missed. Friday nothing was done. I went in Friday afternoon to the office and reported it again. Was told that they would pick it up on Monday. Monday it wasn't picked up. They picked up the other side of town on Tuesday, their regular day, and they finally got ours on Wednesday. So we went a whole week, and the whole weekend of July 4th with our recycle bins sitting out in the street, and a lot of them were overflowing, so it didn't sit very well. And then of course we had gotten our utility bills the same week, and talking about the increase in the water bills. In July of 2019, when they raised the base rate to 3,000 gallons, that really hit a lot of single people like myself, and there are a lot of us in town, because I never used the base rate. So I added up through May of this year, from July of 2019, and I have paid for 29,260 gallons that I didn't use. I wish there were a fairer way to do this. Now, I'm in support of the reverse osmosis system for the county. I know that's going to be a high-ticket item, but at the time they did this, I think they could have done it a little more equitable, you know, for people, because there are a lot of people in my category here, I think that, and I think Woody Wilson was the one that addressed it the last time when it was first raised, that there's no incentive for us to conserve, you know, and so I went back and checked. My percentages every year have gone up on what I'm using because, you know, it's why not? I'm paying for it anyway. So that and not, I'm paying for a lot of stuff, services and water that I'm not using, and I'm not too happy about it, and I wish there were a way to correct it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. We will certainly look into that. Madam Clerk.
Scott Crook.
Welcome. Just state your name and address and topic.
My name is Scott Crook. I live at 118 Park Avenue, and the topic is speeding generally, and the inability to enforce the speed limit, despite good efforts. But I speak also particularly for Park Avenue, which is a cut through for the ferries and a couple of large developments. And this will be my third appearance before the board, bringing this issue up. And it's been 3 years. This will be my third annual presentation. And I don't have any handouts, but I have presented the board and the city managers with technical highway engineering studies. And Alderwoman Mosteller and Chief Coring were kind enough to meet with a band of neighbors on Park Avenue a couple months ago and committed to gathering facts and data on the speed. So we will see whether it's our imagination or there's a real issue there. So we look forward to receiving that. But believe me, it's not our imagination. I think, and to cut to the chase, my goal is to push or suggest or request, in line with the studies that I've provided, that speed tables be put in. Speed tables are side to side crosswalks elevated about 4 inches, maybe 10 feet wide. And they've been shown statistically to dramatically reduce the speed. And I think, generally speaking, 3 of them would take the starch out of the speeding. And I won't speak for everybody because I haven't spoke to everybody in the neighborhood, but I think there's general support for that. And with regard to the speeding, I just don't think people are able to drive 25 miles an hour. And generally, I would say a vast majority of people drive faster than that. Some unconsciously, because, and you can correlate between SUVs with kayaks and out-of-state licenses trying to get to the ferries, or very important people in big SUVs with cell phone that have really no idea where they are. And then there are just people that like the hot rod. But the fact is that there are senior citizens on Park Avenue that are afraid to walk because of the speeding. There are senior citizens that do walk and are in fear of their lives. So it's a safety issue. And after 3 years of talking about this, I think it's time for the board to strap this on and either tell us, no, it's not an issue, or take some affirmative actions to deal with it. I think that's your job, to enforce the laws. So, again, I think the cost is relatively reasonable. I spoke a long time ago with Bruce Oakley. He said he'd had a paving contractor bookmark them at $1,200 each. That does not seem a lot of money to avoid what I see as an inevitable tragedy, perhaps. And I will leave that with you. My request would be But the board take this under advisement, make an active decision, hopefully the right one, and install the speed tables, not those ugly little speed bumps, but those tables. And then we can see if it works for Park Avenue. And we don't really care if it's Park Avenue, maybe it's Stewart, but let's try to enforce the law or create a 24-hour presence mechanical device that will reduce the speed and keep it at 25. So I thank you for your attention. I look forward to a response.
Thank you, Mr. Crook. Thank you for your comments, and we certainly will take it under advisement as well. Thank you so much, and thank you for being diligent. You know, keep at it. So thank you. Anyone else, Madam Clerk? Okay, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And what I would like to do and recommend is that we move item 4, the public hearing, to item 1. And I will entertain a motion.
And sir, I
for
have
that.
something I'd like to add to the agenda in addition to moving item 4 to item 1. I would like to discuss implementing the policy of Alderman of the Month again. It was a procedure that we had in effect previously, and it's fallen by the wayside, but I think in light of the recent process we went through with evaluating the city manager and our city clerk, it would be a good exercise for each one of the aldermen to have that opportunity once a month to work with those folks on developing the agenda, having the opportunity to bring in a guest to do invocation if they wanted, or if they wanted to have particular resolutions that they feel strongly about, they could have that done on that month. So if we went with the old schedule that was printed in 2020, July would be my month, August could be Tom Lombardi because we'll be in River Mist, September Karen Mosteller, October would be John Allen, Glow Davis in November, and Mark Spencer in December.
Well, thank you for your comment. First of all, we're not adding anything. You know that we do not add to the agenda at the meeting unless there's some sort of emergency. Secondly, we certainly can discuss that, and I'll be glad to discuss it with you and with the Mayor Pro Tem and with the City Manager to let you know why we do the meetings the way we do. So we certainly can do that, but we would not add that or any item to the agenda unless it's an emergency.
Well, I beg to differ. We can add things to the agenda. There's no criteria that says it has to be an emergency. We've been able to add things to the agenda in the past, and we've operated in accordance with the general statutes for aldermen's meetings. I'm just asking that you consider this to be on the agenda. We have a simple yes/no vote on it, and we move on.
You know, if you recall, if an alderman wanted something on the agenda, they had to have it on that Wednesday before the agenda goes out. And that has been, and Mayor Pro Tem, is that true or false?
I believe that that's how we've been operating, yes. And I know what Laura's talking about, but, well, not to get into discussing it, but anyway, I believe that's how we've been operating.
I just like to say that getting the agenda several days early, getting all the documents so that we can be prepared at the meeting and have in front of us and have had an opportunity to read, digest, and ask questions of the city manager about the things that we're going to be deciding is really important. And as you said, if it's not an emergency, we can wait until the next meeting if necessary.
Yes. I agree, and I feel like we should continue that policy. We certainly can put it on the agenda for the next meeting if you would like to, but we certainly can discuss it beforehand. I had, when I became mayor, I talked about this with Bruce Oakley, and I felt like the meetings would understand that's what Mayor Dove and that previous board had done, but It's a new mayor and a new board. And I made that decision along with Mr. Oakley, who agreed that we would forego the Alderman of the Month and just go straight into the business of the meeting. And so I've been doing these for, over a year now, and it seems to go pretty smoothly in that regard. So, as I say, we'll talk about it, and we can have it on the agenda for the next meeting. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as is, with moving item 4 up to item 1? Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you. Opposition noted. Okay, our next item is the ethics statement. If any members know of any conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest concerning matters on the agenda, please so state at this time. Anyone with a conflict? Okay, great, thank you. All right. Item F, approval of the consent agenda. On our consent agenda, we have the minutes from the regular Board of Aldermen meeting, June 10th, 2021. We also have the minutes from the closed session from the Board of Aldermen meeting, June 10th, 2021. We also have minutes from the special Board of Aldermen meeting, June 28th, 2021. Also, an amendment to Chapter 3, Animal Welfare. This is when an animal unprovoked bites or attacks someone, and this is to include cats as well, and this is the way in which the city handles this matters. Item 5 is the Disaster Recovery Services Agreement, and this is for the picking up of vegetation and that type thing after hurricanes, and so that is in your packet. Item 6, the GFL contract extension. This is for solid waste collection and transportation and disposal, and also for recycling. And then the item 7 is the Oceanside Holdings annexation request. That's 1304 North House Street. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Moved.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay.
That was on the agenda when
Right.
we had it.
Yeah. So it was about a personnel matter concerning the city manager, and those that watched that meeting or tuned in afterwards would know that we rehired him, of course, extended his contract. He received a raise, and he has a 3-year contract now instead of a 1-year contract. So. Yes. Yes. All right. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Any other further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. Our next item is special recognition, and this is a proclamation concerning our parks and recreation, and it's National Park and Recreation Month. And is Heather here? Sorry. We're blessed to have great parks in Southport. Waterfront Park is a wonderful view. Cavness Park, great for picnics. property taxes, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to the development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors, and recreate outdoors. Whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Southport recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, Joseph B. Hatem, Mayor of the City of Southport, North Carolina, and the Board of Aldermen hereby proclaim that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Southport. So our parks, you know, they bring back your childhood memories, and you're also there with your grandchildren. So it's such a wonderful thing that we have in Southport. Our next item will be the public hearing text amendment on the short-term rentals. This has been a methodical and productive process. I want to thank the Planning Board and the city staff for their due diligence, and I want to thank the citizens who have participated in making their comments and concerns known. The tradition of inns like the Brunswick Inn and Kate Stewart's boarding house in Southport from years gone by. So there is this tradition of people coming to Southport. This was the county seat, the courthouse was here. So we do have that tradition. But with technology, the dynamics change, and the city, the citizens, the businesses adapt, evolve, define, and regulate in a way in which there is a way to move forward. Protecting and preserving the historic village atmosphere of our neighborhoods, the quality of life, where you know your neighbors and they are a part of our community, while allowing commerce that has developed due to the age of the internet. I've read the comments from the Planning Board, as has the Planning Board meeting, as has the Board of Aldermen, and I quote several. Restrictions added to short-term rentals will reduce the number of potential buyers and have a negative impact on property values. Residents of Southport have the right to peace and tranquility. Unfair to restrict. It's good for the economy. Short-term rentals in residential areas are eroding the foundation of a small community. So I hereby declare this public hearing open. I call on Mr. Thomas Lloyd to start the dialogue on short-term rentals.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Aldermen. I'll give you a quick summary on where we're at, and then we'll actually dive into the ordinance just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, and so the public is on the same page as well with what the actual regulations are. But in summary, this text amendment is a amendment to Article 2, 3, and 8 of the Unified Development Ordinance, and it would add a permitting process for short-term vacation rental zoning permits as well as homestay zoning permits. The process is laid out in section 2.6 of the proposed amendment that you have in front of you. It would also designate zoning districts where they would be permitted by right, as well as use standards for those different uses of homestays and short-term vacation rentals. It also establishes enforcement procedures as well as definitions to the Unified Development Ordinance relating to both short-term vacation rentals and homestays. So short-term vacation rentals are defined as a dwelling unit with up to 6 guest rooms that is used and or advertised through an online platform or other media for transient occupancy for a period of less than 30 days. A short-term vacation rental is considered a non-residential lodging use, and the owner is not required to be present during the rental stay. Short-term vacation rentals would be permitted in PUD, CBD, and BD, and they would require an annual zoning permit that would be valid from January 1st through December 31st. Any existing short-term vacation rentals that are already existing will be rendered a non-conforming use in the city's residential zoning districts. These legal non-conforming short-term vacation rental uses will be allowed to continue, assuming that they obtain a valid short-term vacation rental annual zoning permit within 60 days if this ordinance is adopted. The legal non-conforming use will terminate upon discontinuance of the use for a period of 180 days or a failure to renew the annual permit. That 180-day requirement is pretty standard for non-conforming uses, and you see that in other types of non-conforming uses as well, or if they fail to get that permit. All short-term vacation rentals would be subject to the use standards found in section 3.82, which we'll get into in a minute. Just to go through some of those use standards that I think are pretty important. Short-term vacation rentals are required to have a designated responsible party. This person or property management company would have to reside within 20 miles of the short-term vacation rental. They would also have to be available to respond to complaints within 45 minutes of their receipt. And short-term vacation rentals would also have to have a minimum of $1 million in general liability insurance. Language has also been added regarding violations of these regulations. 3 final determinations of violations of the ordinance within a 365-day period would terminate the permit for a period of 3 years, and that's if it's a permitted short-term vacation rental, so not a non-conforming, but one within a different zoning district where it is permitted by right. If there are 3 final determinations of violations for a non-conforming short-term vacation rental, the rights and claims to operate the rental would be forfeited. Homestays are different. They are defined as a private resident occupied dwelling unit, and these have up to 2 guest rooms where overnight lodging can be provided to transients for compensation, and where the use is incidental to the primary residential use of the building. So this would be considered an accessory lodging use. With these, the permanent resident would be required to be present during the rental stay, and it would also have to be their primary residence. They would also require an annual zoning permit that would be valid from January 1st through December 31st. These are permitted by right, assuming they meet the use standards in all of our zoning districts. They would also be required to maintain a minimum of $500,000 in general liability insurance. So I'll get into a little bit of the meat of the ordinance just so everybody's on the same page. I mean, I've summarized some of the most important parts, but we'll actually go into it just so everybody's aware. So if you review 2.6 common review procedures, it does add a letter for an annual zoning permit for homestays and short-term vacation rentals. And, it just says the UDO administrator shall issue homestay and short-term vacation rental permits in accordance with Article 3 zoning. These annual 3 zoning permits must be renewed each year before the expiration date and in accordance with the terms of this UDO. The annual zoning permit for homestays and short-term vacation rentals is valid from January 1st through December 31st in the year of issue and must be renewed annually. The annual zoning permit located in a residential zoning district must be renewed by the property owner of record prior to the expiration of the existing zoning permit to maintain a non-conforming use. Failure to maintain a valid zoning permit for a non-conforming short-term vacation rental will result in forfeiture of all legal rights. The next changes that you see in your packet are just adding the uses of homestays as an accessory use in our table of permitted uses. And as you see there, that's allowed in R10, R20, multifamily, and the planned unit development district from the city standpoint. And we also have short-term vacation rentals added as a use as well later on in the table, as you will see under shooting range outdoor. So we get to 3.6, which is the accessory use standards. We have a section there, a letter there for homestay, and where homestays are permitted, there are some supplemental standards. There can be no display of goods, product, services, or other advertising for these. They also, as I said earlier, have to be managed by the full-time resident of the property and by somebody who is present during that homestay term. There may be no activities other than lodging, so special events including weddings, receptions, and other large gatherings would not be permitted. There are no additional off-street parking requirements for a homestay than would normally be required for a residential home. Only one permit shall be permitted per property. Homestay permits shall be limited to 2 guest rooms at a time. The length of stay of guests shall not exceed 30 days. Exterior lighting is required to be residential in nature. I mentioned this earlier, but homestays are required to maintain a minimum of $500,000 general liability insurance. They also must pay any applicable taxes, including occupancy and sales taxes, to the appropriate entities. They shall not provide food for guests or provide prepackaged or unpackaged foods or beverages for guests. It shall comply with all current and applicable building codes, and accessory dwellings with a special use permit that have conditions restricting that would not be eligible for a homestay use. The last supplemental standard there is just reiterating that an annual homestay zoning permit is required. So the next addition to the ordinance is 3.8, non-residential use standards for short-term vacation rentals. And a lot of these are pretty much the same. I'll just mention some of the differences here. With these, we do get into the responsible party requirement, the designated responsible party requirement that we would have to have. There would also need to be rental rules, including the maximum number of guests per stay, prohibition of any large gatherings, trash disposal procedures and sanitation schedules, our noise ordinance hours, where guests are to park, and emergency contact info are required to be posted inside the unit. Once again, the $1 million of general liability insurance would be required. They would also be required to get an annual zoning permit. And just to kind of get into the non-conforming status a little bit more, a short-term vacation rental in residential zoning districts must have been in operation as a short-term vacation rental prior to the date of the adoption of the standards, if they are adopted. No new short-term vacation rentals would be able to be established in residential zoning districts, that being R10, R20, and multifamily, after the adoption of the proposed standards, if they're adopted. They would also have to apply for that short-term vacation rental permit within 60 days of the adoption of standards. And once again, they can continue in operation until such time that the use is either discontinued for a period of greater than 180 days, or if they fail to renew the annual zoning permit. Let's see. In terms of enforcement procedures and violations, I mentioned this earlier, but for any permitted short-term vacation rental in a district where it's permitted by right, so if that's business district or CBD, If there were any 3 final determinations of violations of city code and or criminal convictions related to the property by a property owner, tenant, guest, host, leasee, or individual otherwise related to the property within any rolling 365-day period, that shall constitute a violation of the supplemental standards of the permitted use and would terminate the short-term vacation rental zoning permit for a period of 3 years. And then once again, for a non-conforming short-term vacation rental, it's the same thing, except rather than terminate it for a period of 3 years, it would terminate the rights just altogether. In terms of definitions, there is a definition for designated responsible party, which would be the local contact person who would be responsible for responding to complaints or issues stemming from the use of the dwelling unit as a short-term rental. There is a definition for guest room, and that is an individually secured sleeping room or a suite with or without sanitation facilities, but does not contain a kitchen. Homestay is defined as a private, resident-occupied dwelling unit with up to 2 guest rooms where overnight lodging accommodations are provided to transients for compensation and where the use is subordinate and incidental to the primary residential use of the building. A homestay is considered an accessory lodging use, and the permanent resident is present during the rental stay. Homestay and short-term vacation rental property owner is defined as the person, persons, or entity whose name appears on the recorded deed of the property or unit being used as a homestay or short-term vacation rental. A homestay permit is the required zoning permit to allow the rental of up to 2 guest rooms within a home as a homestay rental. The City of Southport issues the homestay permit to the applicant after successfully completing the homestay permit application requirements. The permit is valid from January 1st through December 31st in the year of issue and must be renewed annually. Lodging is defined as a premises available for short-term human habitation, including daily and weekly rentals for intervals of less than 30 days. Permanent resident is a resident who resides year-round in the dwelling unit and has declared the dwelling as their permanent residence. Only one dwelling unit at a time may be identified as a permanent residence. Short-term vacation rental is a dwelling unit with up to 6 guest rooms that is used and or advertised through an online platform or other media for transient occupancy for a period of less than 30 days. A short-term vacation rental is considered a non-residential lodging use under this UDO. The owner is not required to be present during the rental stay. We also have a definition for short-term vacation rental operator and manager, and that would be any agency or individual other than the property owner that is operating or managing a short-term vacation rental. And lastly, there's a definition for short-term vacation rental permit, and that is the required zoning permit to rent a dwelling unit or guest rooms within the dwelling unit as a short-term vacation rental. The City of Southport issues the short-term vacation rental permit to the property owner after the successful completion of the short-term vacation rental application requirements. The permit is valid from January 1st through December 31st in the year of issue and must be renewed annually. So, sorry if that was a little bit redundant there, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood the meat and bones of the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the board if there are any. Sure.
Is there going to be a charge for that permit?
So typically a zoning permit has a fee for any type of use, and that would be a $100 charge. But I mean, the Board of Aldermen does set the fees, so there potentially could be a different fee schedule for that.
And how is this going to be enforced, all these rules?
Well, what we would do is we would create, and we already have an application, but we would have an application process on our permitting software that we have on the city website, and we would create a process for that.
Thank you.
If we could, let's go into the public hearing aspect, and then we can, the board can answer and ask, have comments and ask questions. So the public hearing is open, and we're happy whoever would like to speak, please come up. State your name, address, and we know your topic.
about now? All right. There's a question about enforcement, and the city of Wilmington determined that they were going to have to hire a staffer to deal with that. The second issue, it's really about the concerns that I assume will be raised here in just a minute by some of the other folks about the challenges with short-term rentals. I think that my contention would be whether it's parking or noise or trash, that the city has a bunch of different other ordinances and methods to deal with those potential nuisances aside from just regulating short-term rentals. And then the last one is probably the most important one, is in the economy that we're in a tourism community, there's a need for short-term rentals or rentals less than 30 days. If this storm might have been worse, there might have been power folks that needed to come down here and have a place to stay to help out in the community. The movie's coming in, what have you. There are a lot of different reasons that people may need to be in town. So we'd encourage you not to approve the draft in front of you. Instead, you've got a number of property managers that are in this community and have been for years. I'm sure that they would provide you some expertise about the specifics. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, Ms. Felton.
Becky
Thank you.
Felton, 230 North Caswell Avenue in Southport. In 1993, my husband and I were looking for a place to live in Southport, and we chose to consider purchasing the old Catholic church. At that point in time, one of the selling points for that property was that it had been zoned residential. Even though it had been functioning as a church for many years, we were assured by our realtors that it was now in a residential community and would always be residential. Because of that, we chose to purchase the property. We wanted to live in a residential community with neighbors that were going to be there, either owning their property or long-term rentals. We never, ever considered that we might be surrounded by short-term rentals as we are now. Shortly before the planning board most recent meeting in June, I had spoken with a neighbor who told me that they were very concerned about a short-term rental that was adjacent to their property. And they told me about some of the problems that they had had. Because of that, I reviewed the text amendment that was proposed. I developed a one-page summary of that text amendment, and I shared it with friends and neighbors, people who are residents, most of them long-term residents in this community. Many of them were unaware of the proposed amendment. They were all surprised at the number of short-term rentals in our area, our little historic district area of Southport, 106. I learned in my conversations that there are at least 10 such units just within a few blocks of my home. Honestly, knew of some of those, but I was not aware that there were that many. I spoke with individuals who had experienced problems with short-term rentals near their homes. I was told about 2 individuals who had already moved from our neighborhood because of problems with short-term rentals. I spoke with one person who is a very active member of our community, and she told me that they were considering seriously moving because of their concerns about what might happen with the property surrounding them. They live very close to where we're standing tonight. Because of this concern, I developed a statement, and I gave you a copy tonight of what I gave to the planning board. There are 11 property owners who agreed to sign on to a statement saying that they supported regulations and supported the text amendment. These are individuals who are committed to and invested in our community. I have listened to a number of people who are interested in having people invest in purchasing properties in our community for short-term rentals. I suggest that the kind of people we need in Southport are those who want to invest in our community. because they want to live here. And we have 106 such units already. I don't think we need to be encouraging anymore, and I'm strongly ask you as a Board of Aldermen to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm John Barrasett. I live at 118 North Atlantic Avenue. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity to address the Board of Aldermen this evening. This is my perspective as a long-term renter of the situation regarding short-term rentals in Southport, particularly in and near the historic district. My wife Marcia and I reside at 118 North Atlantic, and I am proud to state that our home is on a portion of Lot 49 of the original 100 lots platted in 1792. Excuse me. My wife and I moved to Brunswick County in 1994. We fell in love with the area, with Southport specifically, but initially built a home in St. James, primarily due to the tennis and golf opportunities that provided. Over the next 25 years, we made many friends in Brunswick County and in Southport in particular, and have participated in many community events and volunteer activities. As an example, my wife Marcia has been a volunteer at Dosher Hospital for over 26 years. Over that time, we have seen many changes in Brunswick County and Southport. Many I view as positive, some not so. Throughout that period, we continued to our love affair with Southport, its history, its charm, and most importantly, its people. A little over 2 years ago, Marcia and I decided it was time to downsize our lifestyle. We sold our home and were fortunate enough to find a long-term rental in the historic district of Southport, which was exactly what we were looking for. We thoroughly enjoy our new home and our new neighborhood. It should be noted that when we chose our initial community and later when we moved to Southport, we did not and would not consider moving into a community where the preponderance of homes were short-term rentals. Although we both love the ocean and the beach, we did not consider moving to a beach community for just that reason. Instead, we wanted to move to a neighborhood where we could become friends with our neighbors and share a common community spirit. True to our expectations, since we have moved here, we have become friends with our neighbors. We have been welcomed as a member of a true, old-fashioned, small-town neighborhood. We accept each other regardless of our backgrounds and help each other out in times of need without question or hesitation. It is exactly that spirit that we love and pray that it will not change. I am alarmed by the current rapid growth of short-term rentals in the residential areas of Southport. I fear that if the current growth rate continues unabated, the very nature of Southport that attracts visitors and which my wife and I love will be eventually lost. Please consider this possible scenario. A family who has lived here in the historic district for multiple decades or even generations. They find themselves surrounded by short-term rental properties and as a result feel compelled to relocate. They choose to move to a nearby community with a homeowners association because they feel that community's HOA would prevent that from happening there. If that scenario actually happens, I would consider that incredibly ironic and extremely sad. I am not opposed to change, but I believe that it should be balanced with consideration of the long-term effects and regulated accordingly. I propose to you that the birth and subsequent growth of VRBO, Airbnb, and other similar platforms has created a discontinuous growth of short-term rentals, particularly in historic communities. Many other communities have faced these concerns, and I applaud, have added regulations and rules to address the resulting concerns. I applaud the efforts of the Board of Aldermen and the Planning Committee and the Planning Board and city staff to also provide similar regulations. And I strongly support the need to regulate the existing and control the growth of short-term rentals in Southport. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Ms. Harper.
Hi there. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Alderman. I am Ginger Harper, and I live at 105 East Bay Street here in Southport. Some things, or sometimes in the last year, it seems like we've had one crisis after another. And we've had to deal with the hurricanes, the pandemic, the emotional upheaval, just to name a few. But I've seen many, many good things happening here also. People have come together like I've never seen before in support of one another. And I see many big, important, good things happening, including some things like the House Street Sewer Project, with which had been neglected for a long, long time. And I applaud you all in taking the bull by the horn and addressing that, where others in the past have just kind of let it just slip away. These were tough jobs, and you tackled them, and you have other things now that you've got to address for we, the citizens of Southport. There is a spirit of collaboration and transparency in our civic life now. And there's a new sense of bravery among our public officials, a willingness to tackle the hard problems and to have a big impact on this town and the quality of life that we enjoy as citizens of Southport. The willingness to take on the tough issues is one of the reasons we're here tonight. And in a nutshell, the explosion of short-term rentals in Southport is changing the very fiber of our community. It has grown from a couple of dozen in the past couple of years to right at or right under 200 in our area now in Southport. We see the houses that have been family homes for generations being turned into little more than hotels full of people who don't know the posing problems of traffic, water, sewer, infrastructure, crime, health, and code enforcement, just to name a few. Neighbors to some of these houses have to put up with the noise and loud music at night, illegal parking, blocking of driveways and access, littering, cups and cans all over the yards, and general disrespect for other people that are in our community. They're obnoxious. The ones that I have seen have been very obnoxious from people that have their priorities on partying rather than politeness in our town. It's been like the Wild West, especially when law enforcement has to get together and get involved with settling down these rambunctious visitors that are coming and stopping in our town. And they're fighting among themselves and smoking pot out in the streets. So, there's a cute saying that says, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Guess what? They're thinking the same of our town now too. What happens in Southport stays in Southport. I don't like that. Well, That's the way many people are acting, and many renter owners and rental operators are going right along with being consistently unresponsive to neighbors' concerns and requests that they do something to rein in the problem and the short-term rentals that have been led to. In the past time for our city of Southport, to the real effective standards of government on this industry, I fully support the plan proposed here tonight. I've been a real estate agent and broker for nearly 40 years in our area, and I own commercial properties and residential properties in Southport and throughout the town. And I know that this policy is going to have a negative consequence to some of the people that work in our town, and some of my real estate colleagues do not agree with me. You know, they want to get that money. I think it's a greed thing is what I think. But I feel like we've got to keep in mind what Southport is, what it means to us, why we're here. And blowing that away is just not acceptable for this town that we've all grown to love so much. But I also know that for every home that I've sold in this town, the prime selling point of Southport is Southport itself. That means people come here to enjoy the Cape Fear River, the shade of our beautiful oak trees, and the common sense of community and getting involved with quiet togetherness. We will be able to keep property values up. We will not be able to keep our property values up if we lose that feeling of home here. More importantly, I think it's the quality of life that we will lose. So I offer you a different slogan. What's happening in Southport may kill Southport. Be aware of that. It's going to affect every one of us, I feel, in a very detrimental way. We are not Oak Island. We are not Carolina Beach. We are not Myrtle Beach. And we're certainly not Nags Head. And for one, I don't want to be like those towns. There is a place for those short-term rentals, and that's on the oceanfront and Second Rose in these communities. Not here, not in our town. We're Southport, and it's time we stood firm and guided change in an effective way to protect what we have and conserve it for the future, for our children and our grandchildren. Be brave. Lead from this front on this issue. Make sure our neighborhoods continue to be filled with neighbors, not tenants. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Bell. Thank you for the opportunity to let us speak. I live at 303 East 8th Street, and I have been here for about 15 years now, and I've seen the same things that others have talked about with small town and growing. We have a lot more technology and a lot more people that are coming and going. However, I'm a little bit opposite of the ones who have spoken. I do not agree with the amendment. I personally used my home as an Airbnb a while back when economically we had some issues and needed to be able to survive. We're right now in an economic situation in our country, in our counties, in our states, and people are utilizing and doing what they can in their best way to survive. Some have talked about crime rates. If they've gone up, I don't know that we've heard that, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. If it has, then we need to talk about that. This is an area that we can benefit as a city that is cut off and landlocked and can't annex without just automatic anymore, and so that's a tax revenue base that could be beneficial for us. I don't think that all people who are utilizing their homes as a short-term rental should be considered greedy. Some of them are doing it for the personal reasons that they need to survive economically. Water bills have gone up, utilities have gone up. There are a lot of senior citizens in this community who live in areas that can't afford their water bills, that can't afford those utilities, and they may need to resort to those areas in which they can, again, survive. If we talk about trash, I live 2 blocks down from a bar. I know what it's like to have beer bottles in my yard on a nightly basis, bottle caps, trash that's tossed out. That's from everyday citizens or people that live here. So I also know of a home that was on my street prior to it being sold, was an Airbnb, and I didn't know it. It was one for 5 years. I never had a clue that that's what they were utilizing it for. As a neighbor and as a citizen, that was not brought to my attention. And then once we began, we made sure that we did the right things as well. So I think that we need to think about what we're doing, because there are a lot of constitutional challenges to this, not just within our county, but within the state. Do we want to continue or spend our tax dollars to arguably to fight something that's going to end up being challenged in court? So let's look at this from a perspective as well and see what we can do to make this the right decision. I completely oppose the way it stands right now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Casey Seiler. I'm 116 Stewart Ave. I also have a short-term rental that is located at the back of my property that I started as a financial necessity last fall when I lost my job. Tonight, I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of Pamela Frendano of 6189 River Sound Circle of Southport Realty. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important issue. We support a permitting process and regulation of short-term rentals in the city of Southport that protects the rights of all law-abiding, tax-paying property owners. We do not support the elimination of property rights, which will be the result of the ordinance as it's currently written. A 60-day window to obtain a short-term rental permit is not adequate to protect future property owner rights. That being said, we respect the rights of full-time residents that may deal with a troublesome short-term rental. A short-term rental ordinance, along with existing noise, trash, and parking ordinance, can ensure the ongoing coexistence of full-time residents and part-time residents that choose to rent their property in a law-abiding manner. We ask the Board of Aldermen to consider 5 points. First, the COVID pandemic prevented participation by some in this process, that being late in 2019. We ask for more time to study the issue and allow for additional public comments that may not have been able to participate in the last year. Just by being at these meetings, I've heard probably 8 different numbers of how many short-term rentals we actually have in Southport. Number 2, the short-term rental not be made a scapegoat in the tremendous growth in the number of residents in our community and the overwhelming number of day trip tourists that visit Southport. Just like it was mentioned before, some of us live near bars. We can't blame all the trash and all the noise on people coming to visit and staying in short-term rentals. 3, that residents spoke in the planning board public comment on all sides of the issue, and many residents have been coexisting with short-term rentals and did not even know it. Like it was said, you had 10 next to you and didn't know it until this issue came up. My neighbors do not know that I have a short-term rental unit in the back of my property because it is managed and the noise ordinances are followed. 4, enforcement of the ordinance as written. How will this be enforced, especially if we can't even enforce our current noise ordinance? 5, the draft ordinance being considered passes to the Board of Aldermen without unanimous support of the Planning Board, following 4 calls for a motion to be made to accept the draft. This indicates further tweaking may ensure more solid ordinance is passed. A good ordinance will protect the rights of all law-abiding citizens. We ask the Board of Aldermen to consider making the permit processing ongoing. Respectfully, Pam Ferdano, and thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Put down to my level here.
Is that good? Sorry. Good evening. I'm so glad to see some of you guys, some of your familiar faces. My name is Melanie Marshall Robbins. I am the president of Oak Island Accommodations. We are a professional property management company serving our area since 1991. OIA currently manages 4 vacation rentals in Southport, in addition to the rentals that we have in Oak Island. I'm also a member of the board of North Carolina Vacation Rental Managers Association, as well as the International Vacation Rental Managers Association. And I come to you today to make the same request our company has made to the planning board, which is to ask to set a time to have a conversation with the local professional property managers. Lost my train of thought, my thing here, let's see, sorry. So I come to you about having a conversation with us to have a conversation with professional property managers in your community to understand our business and industry before passing a new short-term rental regulation. I have no doubt that the subcommittee that drafted the regulations spent a lot of time in researching the issue. But understanding the varied needs of a community requires more than research behind a computer. To truly understand the intricacies of the short-term rental operations, we need to have conversations with the businesses and the individuals on all sides. We all can listen and learn from each other, even when there's opportunity to ask questions and receive answers. All vacation rentals, whether managed by a professional property manager or self-managed by an individual owner, they're regulated by the North Carolina Vacation Rental Act. Further, vacation rentals are already required by existing law to submit any applicable taxes. OIA and our individual property owners already have liability insurance on file as a matter of good business. In an email that I sent earlier today, and I've shared the comments we have previously made to the planning board, I sincerely hope that you all have taken the time to understand the issues that remain in the proposed regulations. When the short-term rental text amendment comes before you, as you have, I ask that you send it back to the subcommittee, as there's still work needed to craft something that's fair and balanced for regulations among all accommodation options in Southport. I truly believe there's the opportunity to both address the concerns expressed by all the residents and to allow for a variety of lodging options for visitors that travel to America's happiest seaside town. Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. I will add one other thing is I've been doing this 30 years. That means that I wasn't in diapers when I started, but I've been doing this a long time, and this has been coming down the pipeline for many, many years, and I didn't think it would actually come here. Yet I understand the quality and the enjoying your quiet enjoyment. I wouldn't want that next to me, but I think there is a way to work it out and have a good, fair way of enforcing things. And by having that conversation with those of us who've been doing this 30 years, 40 years, please let us help. We want to educate and help make this a fair regulation. Thanks.
Welcome, Mr. Fosbury.
Thank you, sir. My name is Hugh Fosbury. I live at 120 West Moore Street, just down the road here. Lived here about 8 years, and love the area. I'm not here to really have a position right or whichever side of this. We have a B&B in town. My wife's a broker of a real estate company, and we manage a short-term rental company. So I guess one could argue that I could take a position on both sides and perhaps benefit from it. So that's not why I'm here. What I am here is to ask the board just to consider a few more questions as you consider this amendment. I've got 5 questions specifically that perhaps you've thought about. If not, I would ask you to consider these. Number one, it was just mentioned there's different numbers that have been bandied about. 106. I just heard 200. If the problem is as big as perhaps it's been discussed, then yes, I'm too worried. I just don't have a good feel for how big this problem really is. We've heard 106. My question is, how are those 106 short-term rentals identified? Where are they? Questions have been posed at previous meetings. The Inn at River Oaks, they've got 8 properties. Does that count as 8 short-term rentals? I don't know. The River Hotel down here has a number of properties. Do those count as individual units of the 106? I don't know. So those will be useful questions to get answers on. So how will these be identified? Where are they currently? Are they currently in the Central Business District, the Business District, or PUDs? Where are the current 106 that are identified? Where are they now? So we understand that they're allowed in those 3 areas in the future. How many are currently there? So how many are these affected? That's my question. The complaints, how will these be handled? I understand there will be 3 complaints allowed, and then after that, the permit is revoked. So how will these complaints be logged? How will they be filed against the short-term rentals? What's the process there? So that'd be helpful to understand, and perhaps you've already thought about that. And I guess my last question is, how many homes do we have in the community? Do we have, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000? I'm just curious, on a percentage basis, 106 short-term rentals, what percentage is that of our community? It's just an interesting piece of information. Not that it's going to dictate anything, but it'd be curious to understand the scope of this, to really understand if it's as big a problem. I fully appreciate the need to prevent it from getting a big problem. I just don't know how big of a problem it currently is. I guess if I lived right next to one, perhaps I'd be more in tune to it. But on 120 West Moore Street, it's not been that big of an issue. That's just my position. So just a few other questions I would ask the board to consider as you're pondering this important topic. Thank you.
Hey y'all, how you doing? Board of Aldermen, Honorable Mayor, it's so glad to see everyone today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Rebecca Kelly, and I am a lifelong resident of Southport. I went to Southport Elementary. I grew up at 6014 Dutchman Creek Road in Southport, and I purchased a property with my husband when we moved back to town at 5971 Dutchman Creek Road in Southport. My children attend Southport Elementary and attended the Nesting Place preschool in town prior to that. I am also a business owner. I own the Inn at River Oaks at 512 North House Street, and I am the broker in charge of the new Linda Haraway Group Southport office and Island Vacations. We manage properties on Oak Island, and we do have one here in Southport. I am a professional property manager. I am an innkeeper, and I am a lifelong Southport resident. There are a few questions that I have that I put forth to you as the Board of Aldermen that I would really love for you to consider prior to adopting this in its current form. Number one, someone mentioned earlier that their realtor told them they were zoned in a residential area and that could not change. Realtors cannot guarantee the zoning of a property for any length of time. Again, it was just mentioned, how did we get to the 106 short-term rental properties? Did they pull from Airbnb, VRBO, our local short-term rental management companies' websites? What about the overlap that comes with those? There are many properties that are listed on all 3 potentially. They can be on many more vacation rental sites as well. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are several questions that we did bring to the planning board, one of which was, what is the actual issue here? Have we had more police calls? Is there more crime that can be actually contributed to the short-term rentals? So what problem are we trying to solve right now? I'm not saying I don't support regulation in any form. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in the current form, that prohibits potential future property owners' rights and potential infringement of current property owners' rights. We really need to consider what we're putting forth in this current document. When you choose to live in the downtown historic district, how can you say that the people here are staying in a short-term rental and not someone who's staying elsewhere and came in for the day? For years, and as I said, I grew up here, so I have seen it most of my life. People have parked illegally. There have been rambunctious people. People have left trash on the street. This is not a new issue. This is something that has been going on basically my whole life. As Southport continues to gain national fame for being the happiest seaside town, we are going to increase the number of people who are interested in coming to our fair town. They need a place to stay. On weekends at the Inn at River Oaks, I have 16 rooms. I have people who call every day and try to get a canceled room. I could build 30 more rooms on a weekend and have every single one filled. I also, in the wintertime, could have it sit empty the entire winter. The short-term rental proposal that you see before you has a 180-day time frame where if it is not used for short-term rental in that 180 days, it can no longer be a short-term rental. What does that mean? Can the owner not move in for the winter time during the slow part of the year and then be able to use their home again as a short-term rental in the spring and summer? Several professional property management companies in town have offered the planning board and their short-term rental committee to have a conversation and be part of helping create regulations which would be a happy medium for both sides. We were told during those meetings that it was inappropriate for us to have that conversation, and the appropriate time would be in public comment. The planning board had to call for a motion 4 times before someone was willing to put the motion forth and second it to get this to you guys today. A free market will regulate itself. The current property prices continue to go up, which means investors looking to make a profit on short-term rental are losing their ability to do so. The margins are slim to begin with. As you begin to add higher property values, the investors start to shrink away from our town as investment opportunities because they can no longer make a profit in doing so. We are Southport. We need to guide and change to protect this town for our children and the economic growth that needs to come with it. I would like to put forth to you as the board that our issue for growth is not a short-term rental issue, but an issue with the new developments coming in, tearing down our trees, and our historic Southport cottages instead of trying to fix those up. We have several owners who have purchased some of the derelict properties in town, have completely renovated them, and put them forth for short-term rental. So they are now contributing members of our town instead of falling in on themselves and are part of our tax revenue base. If 106 is currently a large portion of our homes in town, with the additional new proposed Indigo project, as well as the project happening on the end of 11th Street, what percentage are we then? We're significantly smaller. What effect does that growth have in our community rather than the short-term rentals? I appreciate your attention today, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bev Hammond. I live at 506 West Owens. I cannot believe I'm going after Rebecca because everything she said was so perfect. But I only have 2 points, and I think that everybody that's spoken has had some very, very valid points. And I think we can all agree that there needs to be some document that defines what the short-term rentals are going to look like in the future. The only 2 things I want to speak to, though, are one is, as Rebecca referenced, the blighted properties. We moved to town a few years ago. We live within the city limits. We purchased a property that was very blighted, and we renovated, fixed it up. It is now a long-term rental. Since then, we've purchased 2 additional very blighted properties. They're all cottages that have been that were built probably almost 100 years ago, and our efforts are to, even though they're not the prettiest cottages, are to save them because they're part of Southport's history. We're not looking to tear them down and to build a fancy house and turn it, flip it, whatever. But we do feel that we should have the ability to decide going forward if we would like this to be a short-term rental, a long-term rental. We literally live in town. These are all properties in town, and that's not something that we're going to have the ability to do given the current document if it's accepted and as it's written right now. The other point I wanted to make, and I'll be brief on this as well, is that I feel that this document could be returned to committee and made a lot stronger and a lot more palatable if it would involve people from all facets, people like us who haven't lived our whole lives but fully appreciate the history, respect the history, and want to see Southport thrive, as well as people who've lived here a very long time and have the history to be able to help us get this document to that level that it's going to be accepted by all. No one's going to, not everyone's going to be happy with how it looks, but that it would be a nice compromise on both parts. And as it stands, as it's written right now, as I understand it, which could be wrong, the properties we have, our options will be to flip them or to have a long-term rental in them. So we will figure it out, but we feel like we should have the ability to use it as some of these as a short-term rentals should we choose to, because we are here, we're involved, all of the things that Rebecca spoke to. And lastly, we do have a few short-term rentals within our neighborhood, and we coexist perfectly fine. We've met a lot of wonderful people who have come into town to enjoy everything that Southport has to offer, and in some cases we've made friendships with people that we would not otherwise ever have met. They come back frequently. Sometimes it's people you see for a weekend and never see again, but not once have that I can think of have we had any issue with, we've had more issue with neighbors in some of our properties around us than we do with the people coming into town on a vacation who are here to enjoy everything that Southport has to offer. So those are the only two things I really wanted to discuss, and I would greatly appreciate if you would consider sending this document back to have it fine-tuned. It's not that it's not a good document, just that I think it could be tweaked to make it a little bit less restrictive and potentially something that would be more palatable to everybody and not cause strife within town when it's adopted. That's all.
Good evening. My name is Rich Alt. I live at 6165 Cottage Creek Road in Southport. I only have two quick questions for clarification for people who have been watching and have been texting me. First of all, Thomas, when you use the term, Mr. Lloyd, when you use the geographic areas where this would be allowed, and you said the PUD areas, could you further define that for the people that aren't really as familiar as you are with what that means?
Yes, it's a plan unit development.
No, I mean physically, which areas of Southport are you referring to? Are you talking about just the historic district, or are you talking about all the PUDs?
No, I mean, it would be all the PUDs.
Okay.
So it would be, for example, Indigo, Plantation, Harbor Oaks, the Lane, etc.
Would this statute supersede the homeowners association? Those are the two questions I had. Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Tracy Ballou, and I live at 206 West Nash, right in Southport. Thank you all so much for hearing us today. The short-term rentals have become a real problem in my neighborhood. I have one next door and one across the street, and you know, the management companies say that they have everything under control and that they're vetted and all that. Well, it's not happening next to me, and I didn't move here to live next to, two practically motels and with people going in and out constantly. Last week we had a group that looked very scary, and they were walking up and down the street smoking pot. A couple weeks before that, some people had their children, and he was in the back of my house in my Volkswagen rummaging through it. There's been noise issues and all that, and so I know somebody asked about the police calls. Well, I'm reluctant to call the police because these people will know that I called the police on them. And, I don't know what retaliation would be because I don't know these people. They're strangers. They're transients. I have no idea if they're violent or if they carry guns and, that kind of thing. So it's kind of worrisome. And the historic area of Southport that's what it's about. It's about community. And I feel like because the investors are looking at Southport, and as some of the realtors have said, it's great investments and doing all of this, and it's just taking away, the character. And I've already had two friends who were very, very prominent in our volunteer groups here in town that moved because of the short-term rental issue and because of how it was just growing and getting out of hand. And Southport isn't Southport as it was before, and I'm afraid we're going to lose the charm and character of what people like to come to Southport. They've been coming to Southport for over 50 or 60 years, and they didn't have to stay next door to me and across the street. There's plenty of places. Everybody who comes to Oak Island comes to Southport for the day. Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach. They all make day trips over here, and that's great. We love having them, and that what has built the economy. Not necessarily having all these short-term rentals. That's not going to destroy the economy. The economy's here. The tourists come here. But they're not going to come if it becomes, an unsavory kind of place that's only made up of transients that, rent. So I would like the board to consider passing this because I think it's pretty fair, because some of the people are saying, that the short-term rentals that are current, they can still continue. All they got to do is get the permits. I mean, how tough is that? People have things, they have to have permits. So, they're going to continue. What it's going to help is to maintain what historic area we have left to continue. And there are other places that these are appropriate and people like to stay. So I think that, some of the issues here are kind of blown out of proportion. And I will also say that most of the people, not all of them, who are against this proposal don't live in a non-HOA place in Southport. Many of them do, but most of them don't. Realtors, management companies, they live in HOAs or they live out of town. They don't have it living next door to them or across the street, so they don't know what it's like. And they maintain that, the management companies maintain that they vet people. People that I know who have rented through management companies, they don't vet them, they don't do anything. So, I'm just concerned about the information that's being shared is all correct, as to how things are actually run. So I'm all for Southport. I love it here. I've been here 6 years. I moved here because it's a nice small town, and I wanted to be part of a community and volunteer in groups and that kind of thing. And that's what makes up Southport and why it is such a charming little town. And I just want it to stay that way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker? Anyone else that would like to speak in public hearing? Okay. Madam Clerk, there are three letters that we need to have read that are different from the others. Some of the letters that people have spoken from that group. There's one from the NC Realtors, there's one from the NCVRMA, and one from Mr. Lightbourne. If you could read those, please. Yes, please.
And Mr. Swenson's.
And Mr. Yes, Mr. Swenson, if you would like. Absolutely.
Okay, this one is from Paul Swenson.
Well, we mentioned well, we can read them all, but they're in your packet. They were, and I was trying to read ones that may not have been seen before, but if the board would like, you can read all of them. I'm not trying to censor anyone, just didn't want to repeat the same items over and over. Yes, they're in the public record as well. Yes, of course, but you can certainly read them. That'd be fine.
So this is from Paul Swenson. He is at 107 North Atlantic Avenue. When it comes down to it, short-term rentals are about making money. It's about realtors and management companies tapping into the hot short-term rental market that exists in Southport. It's about investors who buy short-term rentals to maximize their real estate investment and who have no intention of ever residing in Southport. It's about people who can only afford a second home by renting it out as a short-term rental, all at the expense of long-term residents. Short-term rentals have nothing to do with preserving the historic character of Southport, its charm, or its sense of community. None of us would be here tonight having this conversation if Southport wasn't such a hot commodity. But judging from some of the comments offered by groups and individuals supporting the need for an increase in short-term rentals are ready to swoop in and save Southport's tourism industry from sliding into economic doomsday. I can't speak for other people in this room, but when I drive through town, it's hard to imagine that Southport is in need of an economic savior. Commercially, this town is on fire. But if we do need saving, let what created the economic boom in Southport continue to save us, which is a vibrant, long-term residential community committed to Southport's charm, historical character, and its well-being. The last thing we need is a plethora of unregulated short-term rentals. We are not a beach community, which have been for years promoted vacation rentals as part of their come to the beach promotion, and we are certainly not Nag's Head. Would like to make one more point. Recently, my wife Maria and I toured a historical home which was for sale on Bay Street, basically a tear down or total gut. Either way, you were building a new home. As we stood in the backyard, the real estate agent said to us the backyard would make a great venue. When I think venue, I think business. When I think business, I think commercial. The realtor was selling us a business in a residential neighborhood. The issue here is that in the historic district, there are a number of large homes with large backyards capable of supporting venues of over 50 to 100 people. I see this as a major conflict as to what constitutes the definition of a residential neighborhood. As property owners, we all have rights, and the most sacred one is the right to quiet, peaceful enjoyment. Okay, the next is from James Lightbourne. We are sending the below letter to be read at the Aldermen meeting tonight. We would appreciate your acknowledgement. Our names are Sharon and Jim Lightbourne. We live at 316 West Street in Southport. We regret not being able to attend the Aldermen meeting tonight, but consider it important to write in support of the text amendment placing restrictions on short-term rentals. At hearings held by the Planning Board, we heard from residents of Southport that have encountered difficulties with short-term rentals in their neighborhoods, renters trespassing on their property, loud parties, excessive trash, public alcohol and drug consumption, and so on. We heard of single women, citizens of Southport, afraid to leave their home based on actions of neighboring renters or even to call the police for fear of retaliation. These are real problems faced by citizens of Southport. Your vote tonight will determine the priority you place on addressing these concerns that your Southport citizens face. We also saw a letter from a realty association to the Planning Board. The arguments for short-term rentals that were stated in the letter and supported by some speakers at the meeting were primarily financial, economic benefits to local businesses, and the increased tax revenue for the city. We understand the economic benefit to realty and management companies of short-term rentals. We understand why Airbnb and VRBO lobbyists are hard at work. But, for example, we thought the realty letter was disingenuous. The author must have read studies done in other locales which show these broader economic claims are, if not false, at least overrated. There is the property rights issue, but we choose to live in a city and understand that we must compromise what we do on our property that may have adverse impacts on our neighbors. Most importantly, we cannot emphasize too much how valuable it is to us to know our neighbors, to be part of a community. We depend on our neighbors. There is great security in knowing who is living next door. Our neighbors watch out for each other and each other's property. Isn't that supposed to be a major benefit of living in a small city? We would not buy a home for our residents next door to a short-term rental. We would most likely move if short-term rentals were next door. We also have learned our lesson. We definitely will review city ordinances regarding short-term rentals should we move. Our concern about living among short-term rentals is partly because we own a short-term rental property on Bald Head. We communicate with our renters to determine whether they will be good renters. In spite of this, we know that short-term rentals are very hard on a house. They generate an incredible amount of trash. There is also increased congestion with people coming and going. There is increased partying and so on, not what you want in a residential area. We support the proposed text amendment that places restrictions on short-term rentals. It does not ban short-term rentals. It just provides what we consider to be reasonable conditions to strike a balance in our city that attempts to protect the desirability of our residential areas. We are citizens of Southport who pay taxes, maintain our property, volunteer, support our local restaurants and other businesses. We urge you to vote to protect our residential areas, keep them as neighborhoods where people will want to live. We urge you to vote for the planning board recommendation and do it now. Delaying only increases the impact short-term rentals have on our residential areas. The next is from the Chamber of Commerce, Kim Feltz. She is the 2020 and 2021 president. Dear board members, the Southport Oak Island Area Chamber of Commerce represents over 500 businesses, including those in accommodation industry, hotels, motels, bed and breakfast inns, property management professionals, and an individual with short-term home rental. Each type of accommodation is valuable to the continued health of our vibrant tourism industry here in Southport, an industry that supports the quality, variety, and quantity of our restaurants, shops, attractions, activities, and ultimately the quality of life for our residents. A 2019 conversion study from the Brunswick County Tourism Development Authority found that visitors to our area spend $175.20 per day per person. Using these figures and calculating the approximate number of accommodations currently available in your city, overnight visitors to Southport expend an approximate $122,128 per day for double occupancy. So you can see the financial importance to our business community that in turn supports the residents. After reading the public comments expressed at the planning board meeting, we noticed that most were not asking for the elimination of short-term rentals, but instead asking this board and ultimately the Board of Aldermen to implement requirements that would bring in some accountability to short-term rental properties and in few cases making them better neighbors. However, the ordinance you are looking at this evening will eventually eliminate short-term rentals from much of the city. This elimination of short-term rentals is highly objectionable. However, there is a better way forward. The North Carolina Association of Realtors has provided the Southport Aldermen a copy of the Town of Nags Head Short-Term Rental Registration Guidance, Frequently Asked Questions, and Event Registration Application. However, with the passage of House Bill 829, what municipalities are able to regulate is being clarified. This shows the fluid nature of regulations on short-term rentals, and without a slow and steady approach to this issue, it could cause the city to become embroiled in legal action. If you will slow your forward progress on the ordinance before you this evening and look to your existing ordinances, you may find the middle ground exists already. Enforcement of existing ordinances could ensure residents have recourse for non-neighborly activities, protect the rights of property owners, and provide regulations for individually managed short-term rentals, bringing them into compliance. Thank you for your time, and we hope you will vote no on the draft zoning text amendment for short-term rental regulations in your packet. Take the time to review new information and look for ways to continue Southport's long-standing tradition of being a welcoming community, as it has been since the days when Wilmingtonians retreated to Southport to enjoy its salubrious breezes. Warmest regards. The next is NCVRMA, Mayor Hatem and the City of Southport Board of Aldermen. The North Carolina Vacation Managers Association is an association of management companies and their affiliates who specialize in vacation rental management. Our members come from all areas of the state, from the mountains to the coast, and represent a large portion of rental managers in North Carolina. The organization was formed to promote the vacation rental business in the state to the public as well as professionals employed in the travel and related businesses. The organization educates its members in a professional and efficient operations and engages in activities which support such operations as well as the good of the industry. We are licensed by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission and many of also members of the Brunswick County Association of Realtors and the North Carolina Realtors. Respectfully submitted points to consider. We appreciate the efforts of our elected officials in protecting our quality of life and the historical aspects of our city. We are also a community which values freedom and the rights afforded to property owners to utilize their properties in a legal manner. First point, the city already has mechanisms to protect against properties from becoming a burden to their neighbors and a blight on our communities. Those should be used first before the enactment of any ordinance that limits homeowners' rights. Homeowners occupying their Renters renting through a professional licensed broker have a lease agreement that specifies such items as occupancy, restrictions on various parts of their stay, and tenants are subject to eviction. Tenants pay either a security deposit or purchase security damage waiver insurance to cover accidents of the rental property. In addition, many short-term renters are sensitive to the communities where they rent and due to the enjoyment of the location behave in order that they might return. Homeowners Association and property owners associations may restrict short-term rentals. However, these are private contracts entered into by the homeowner. Southport needs various types of lodging to promote tourism. Homes protect the beauty of the community versus multi-layered structures. The current text recently passed by the Southport Planning Board creates a separate definition for homestays and short-term rentals. It restricts short-term rentals to being located in non-residential zoning districts. Various stipulations such as private events, the 180-day use rule, and subjective violation language further the need for more work in consideration of property rights. We respectfully ask that careful consideration is given to the fairness of any regulations that can be evenly applied. We welcome the opportunity to be part of the discussion and look for ways to accomplish smart regulations. Signed by Tricia Howarth, President. From North Carolina Realtors. Dear Mayor Hayden and Southport Aldermen, thank you again for your leadership as Southport pursues long-term residential rental regulations that safeguard local quality of life but support the lodging, restaurant, retail, and other visitor-related industries. We appreciate your attention to our letter of May 17th and to our continuing advocacy for use-compatible approach. We reiterate our position that the importance of short-term rentals to Southport's visitor service economy compels the board's preference for non-prescriptive regulations, at least for a probationary period, in advance of any more hostile action against the use. Even as a secondary remedy available after a preferred trial option, we find the Planning Board's recommended draft poorly tailored to Southport's regulatory objectives and unreasonably invasive upon homeowners' enjoyment of their use. Contrary to Planning Board members' efforts to achieve a balanced approach that accommodates the use but redresses related nuisance and density concerns, the proposed ordinance may function as a de facto ban on a significant share of Southport short-term rentals due to its provision of 3.8 Section 213C, that an 180-day discontinuity of non-conforming short-term vacation rentals use voids the homeowner's option to continue the use. Unlike other uses for which failure to satisfy a similar continuity provision might reasonably indicate abandonment of the use, discontinuities in the short-term rental use are an inherent expression of dramatic seasonal variability in occupancy. According to the Southport-specific occupancy data available from AirDNA, 88% of local short-term rental listings are available to renters for fewer than 180 days per year, and 60% of local short-term rental listings are booked by renters for fewer than 90 days per year. Notwithstanding its implications for the viability of the number of short-term rentals identified by city staff as a proxy for related nuisance or density impacts, this data suggests a continuity condition for this use may have significant and unforeseeable impacts on Southport's visitor accessibility. Given the scarcity of conventional lodging options, convenient to downtown Southport, the continuity condition poses unknown hazards to restaurants, retail merchants, and similar staple businesses. Furthermore, the continuity requirement would function paradoxically to establish an effective minimum occupancy, insulating from regulatory impact those high occupancy rentals most contributing to any actual or perceived density or nuisance impacts. Rather than restrict permissible short-term rentals to grandfathered nonconforming uses conditional upon the effective minimum occupancy, Southport might instead establish a general permitting requirement for existing and future short-term rentals as a first remedy and consider establishing a maximum cumulative annual occupancy per rental as a secondary remedy should the prior measure fail to achieve regulatory interests. Such an approach exemplifies the sort of moderate, use-compatible strategy that collaboration with the property management community and short-term rental operators might facilitate. Thank you for your continuing effort to support a thriving and attractive community. We urge your denial of the Planning Board's recommended draft, your development of more definite regulatory goals vis-a-vis short-term rentals, and your collaboration with the property management community and short-term rental operators to achieve them. Short-term rental regulations will have a significant impact on operators' lives and livelihoods, including on their ability to maintain property ownership. An ad hoc planning board subcommittee is not an appropriate authority to independently author regulations of this scope and magnitude. Regards, Porter Graham. Next one is Kristen Good. She's the marketing manager for Oak Island Accommodations. Dear Board of Aldermen, I write to you today reiterating the same request made by many speakers present at the past planning board meetings. Take the time to reach out to the individuals and businesses that have spoken in past public comment periods to foster a balanced discussion and learn from the unique perspectives on all sides of the table concerning the short-term rental regulations proposed. In looking at the draft that has come back from the subcommittee and comparing it to sections of the Unified Development Ordinance for bed and breakfast, or even hotels and motels, the current draft is overly harsh toward short-term rentals and does not fairly regulate the various accommodations options in Southport. For example, the Planning Board has proposed 16 items regulating short-term rentals with a further 15 items regulating homestays. Take this in comparison to the 3 items in the UDO for bed and breakfast establishment or for the 5 items for motels, hotels, or inns. I also have yet to understand the justification for allowing a bed and breakfast in 9 of the 12 districts while relegating a professionally managed short-term rental to just 3 of those districts. Instead of putting forward fair regulations, should the draft pass in its current form, what you have is a document that for all intents and purposes is designed to bring short-term rentals to an end in Southport. For example, you both put in the requirements that the length of stay must be less than 30 days, while further down revoking the option for short-term rental to legally operate if it goes out of use for 180 days. To meet the 180-day requirement, short-term rentals need the option to welcome stays of longer than 30 days, particularly if during the shoulder and off seasons. This provides for the opportunity to rent to travelers wishing to escape a harsh winter. Longer stay lengths also provided for accommodations for Duke Energy Progress outage workers, dredgers maintaining our waterways, and others who service our critical infrastructure. Further, the designated responsible party language does not currently account for the realities of working with professional property manager, which uses a team approach to issue resolution. I would suggest rewriting this definition to allow for businesses to serve in this capacity as well. There are other items like the prohibition on signage that would be counterproductive. Why not allow a sign, something akin to the design of historic home designs, which states the name of the business or individual that manages the vacation rental and at the least a phone number? By allowing this, should a neighbor have a concern, they would easily know how to contact a property management company like ourselves so that we can work directly together to find a solution to complaints. Not all items presented have issues. Items 9 through 11, which touch on liability insurance, taxes, and building code compliance, are already standard operating procedure for professionally managed vacation rentals. I respectfully ask that you send this draft back to subcommittee. There is still much work needed on this text amendment, And my sincere hope this time is that each member of the Board of Aldermen and Planning Board will reach out to members of the neighborhoods and business community to both listen to and understand the arguments on all sides before making changes with far-reaching effects on tourism and property owner rights. I do have one letter from Melanie, but she already spoke, so I don't have to read that one. The next one, Dear Mayor Hayden and members of the Southport Board of Aldermen, my name is Peggy Campbell, and I live at 516 West Brunswick Street, and my husband and I purchased our property in 1999, put a great deal of money and time into it. We've loved watching this neighborhood become a very special place, with everyone becoming good friends and enjoying and helping each other. Even though my husband died 5 years ago, I have continued to live here alone, and I was still able to feel very safe because this is a neighborhood where people care about and watch out for neighbors. Then about a year ago, things changed. A house right behind me was sold and turned into a short-term rental, and it has created many ongoing problems for the neighborhood and for me personally. As is true of so many of the properties in the historic district of Southport, our lots are small, and so we live very close to each other. That is particularly true in my case, where the house behind me is literally in my backyard. Its yard is tiny and has no driveway except for mine. A pressing issue for me is that when I come home alone at night, I am, for the first time in all my 22 years here, afraid, and that's because there is a revolving door of complete strangers right in my backyard. My house faces Brunswick Street, and the short-term renters continually walk through my side and front yards to get to West Brunswick Street and the yacht basin and restaurants. Also, they often bring dogs with them, allow the dogs to poop in my yard, and never clean up after the dogs. Making matters even worse, they park their cars, pickup trucks, and boats in my driveway and in my yard because there is very little space in the short-term rental place. They have frequently blocked me in. My home was once a happy gathering place for the neighborhood, but it has become an undesirable place to be because of the noise, litter, crowding, and other nuisances created by the steady stream of short-term renters. I have had to become a police person, constantly asking the renters to not come on my property and not do the other things I have mentioned. But it has reached a point where I have consulted an attorney about what I can do to protect myself in my home. Taking legal action has never been how I deal with my neighbors, but this has gotten out of control. I am not the only one adversely affected. The ongoing problems reached a point where the people who lived on the other side of the short-term rental felt they had to sell their house in order to escape. Please, I urge you to pass a strong ordinance that will save the wonderful neighbors of Southport. That's all.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That was very good. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. I declare the public hearing closed, and I thank everyone for speaking. And just to let you know that one of the things also that I changed I took the limit off on public speaking. It used to be 3 minutes under the previous board. So this gives everyone an opportunity to speak, everyone who sends a letter and that type thing. And I told them I work 12 and 14-hour shifts, so I'll stay here as long as we need to. So I appreciate your patience and for listening to everyone. And now I will ask the board if they would like to make any comments. Mayor Pro Tem.
I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to start off with. There are cautionary tales from communities across the country that have been affected by the relatively new internet-based Airbnb business model that began in 2008. This business model has grown into a multi-billion-dollar lodging industry, and businesses change at a much faster pace than a municipality can. So that's why we're here today. To respond to a question that some have asked me, why does Southport need these regulations? What are the policy objectives? Our community's core values can be found in the Southport CAMA Core Land Use Plan. The CAMA Land Use Plan is the city's strategic long-range planning document. Every land use decision and zoning change we make must be supported by this comprehensive plan. Within the plan, on page 9, the city's vision and core values are identified. The city planner, Mr. Lloyd, included this in the statement of consistency to support the proposed regulations. And it reads, Southport desires to have an affordable quality of life while maintaining its quiet residential atmosphere and protecting the city's historic assets. It goes on to say, specifically, Southport will endeavor to accomplish the following. 2 of the 5 core values named in this document speak directly to the reasons for the proposed short-term rental regulations. Preserve the city's historic character and preserve the city's residential areas. On page 14, the plan recognizes, and I quote, that Southport appears more like inland Brunswick communities such as Charlotte or Calabash than a beach community like Oak Island or Ocean Isle Beach. Again, this speaks to our historic and residential character as a small town, not a beach rental community. And it goes on to acknowledge that Southport's economy benefits from region-wide tourist populations and day trippers from surrounding communities. Finally, on page 149, page 149 summarizes the 9 general principles used to develop the land use plan. 4 of the 9 principles support the short-term rental regulations recommended by the Planning Board. And it states, the City of Southport land use plan was drafted with consideration given to the following. Southport's core values, vision and core values, preservation of existing urban form, and the character of Southport's historic residential neighborhoods are an important part of our urban form. Limiting potential land use conflicts that could change our character, and preservation of existing residential neighborhoods. Clearly, Southport's long-range comprehensive planning document directs us to preserve that which makes Southport this unique small-town community here at the mouth of the Cape Fear. Because of our location here at the water's edge, we are particularly vulnerable to the changes that would make us become a resort town rather than a community of neighbors. I have an MLS sheet for a home in our historic district that Zillow shows as recently sold. The first line in the realtor's write-up about the house, and I quote, turnkey Airbnb opportunity in the heart of Southport. Southport's historic old town is an extremely small, densely populated area, and the impact of the land uses like whole house transient lodging dilutes the residential character of the neighborhood. The proposed homestay accessory use allows permanent residents to generate income by renting rooms while remaining a member of the neighborhood, like the bed and breakfast rules that require a full-time resident to be present. The ordinance provides regulations that allow established, legally operating, non-conforming short-term vacation rentals in residentially zoned areas to continue to operate. Southport's successful tourism industry is not dependent on short-term vacation rentals within the city's residential neighborhoods. Southport is surrounded by beach rental communities that provide short-term vacation rentals. The quality of life in Southport, in large measure, depends on the residents who live here. We have said over and over again, we are a city of volunteers. We live much larger than most communities our size because neighbors participate and volunteer their time and talents to make their community better. The future of Southport, the community that we love, and our quality of life depends on keeping the neighbor in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other board members?
Yes, I'd like to say something. In the last week or so, I've received dozens of emails, letters, and phone calls. And I've concluded that I must support this new regulation.
Many people would rather confront a big spider or a gator than get up and speak in public. So, I thank everyone on both sides who came here, spoke, as well as the many who spoke at the planning board, and the many who wrote letters, sent me emails, made phone calls. You all have helped me see pros and cons of both sides. You've made this the hardest decision that I've had to grapple with as an alderman. This matters a lot, and it has consequences for both sides. However, frankly, I see my vote tonight ultimately as a vote for the soul of Southport. Thank you.
Any other board members?
Yes, I had a lot of listening to do, as we all have. I have reviewed the document that's been provided, the draft document, but I also, like I do with so many other things, I research and I look to see what other examples are there in the state to deal with a similar topic. The one that I printed, well, two actually. One was an example from Nags Head that was provided to all the board members, I think, by an email. And theirs is relatively light on regulation other than registration and whatnot. But the most compelling one that I came across is a very recent one that was adopted in Chapel Hill on June 21st. And while it has some similarities to what's being proposed here in Southport, it isn't as stringent. And it also provides for more time frames and whatnot. Like instead of a 20-minute, response, there's a 2-hour response for somebody who's the property owner to respond. And instead of 6 months if your property isn't rented out, 18 months. And it lends me to wonder, did they get some assistance on getting some guidance on what maybe are reasonable criteria versus not reasonable criteria? The School of Government provides training on this topic, and they actually have an in-house expert, for lack of a better term, Rebecca Badgett, that was actually listed as an assistant with the Chapel Hill ordinance. So I wonder if we made that kind of person available to our planning board when they were considering any of these, elements of the document. And if we haven't, should we? I do have questions about the requirements on the dedicated short-term rentals, where if it's not used as a rental property for 6 months, then it loses its ability to be permitted anymore if it's in a non-zoned area. And why would we do that to a homeowner that perhaps wants to live in it for 4 or 5 months out of the year and then rent it out other parts of the year? That seems a little unreasonable. Just because of a time frame. There's no other criteria. Just because of a time frame that we've set seems unreasonable. So are we overstepping our bounds is where I'm going with this, with what we can and can't tell people they can do with personal private property? That's the question at Wilmington. That's what the judge was ruling on whether or not they overstepped their authority, the city, with the regulations they put in place. And I would want us to have a review before we implement anything here in Southport to safeguard our risk as the city, because that's what we should do. But we also have a right to implement rules, and I think registration and an understanding of where they can be located and where they can't be located are all fair things to consider. The one thing that was said many times tonight was who was allowed to be involved with the creation of the proposed ordinance. And I think we missed another opportunity. If we didn't use some legal advisors, we also missed an opportunity because we didn't include maybe the business community that deals with these things. We had a committee recently that for the yacht basin safety issues that was comprised of property owners of the yacht basin. But it sounds to me we didn't include any property owners of short-term rentals on this committee. And that's probably not a fair way to do things. So I'm not in favor of passing an ordinance that's written this way right now. I think it's too stringent. I think it needs to be examined for what's legally defensible, what's reasonable, and safeguards the residents, but also allows private use, you know, and without us overstepping our bounds.
That's what I always do when it's a lot of pressure. Thank you all for living in Southport. I've done it off and on all my life. It's not an easy task. I'm glad you're here. I don't care how you came, especially if you plan to live here and contribute. So when you talk about the character of Southport and all these things, it makes my stomach turn. Okay, my grandmother, a nurse, lost her husband at a young age. And I grew up going to my grandma's house, and she had a tenant who rented a room. Now we call it a homestay. We have a place up here with a ghost in it that used to be a hotel. Boats, steamers would come by. They would wave, y'all come to Southport. And we used our homes to accommodate people because we didn't have enough. Let me just say the gig is up. They've got their votes. It doesn't matter what you say. That's the real deal. Okay? This issue has been in place for a long time, and they finally got the votes. And this is your new administration pushing through an issue that they've had for a long time. That's the truth, the whole truth. So, back to my thinking on this. I do sell real estate. If it wasn't for real estate, I wouldn't be here. I couldn't afford to live here and raise my family. My mother lives here on Cape Fear Drive. When my father died, I moved home because she had some beach homes that she was blessed with, and she lives off the VRBO income that allows her to maintain my family home that I was born into in 1970. It has allowed her to hold on. She is by far one of the luckiest residents in town because you just don't have some beach homes that your father built in 1948 and lucky to have held on to. You look at me close. I'm an endangered species, someone who has grown up here, and all my friends have had to leave. Our 401ks are our real estate. It's all we've got. They didn't pay us big money back in the day to have money to pay all these bills. My real estate career is dependent on people that have lost a spouse. They can no longer afford to live here, and they're forced to sell. Most of the time, they're my ex-Sunday school teachers and people like that. And so think about that. Think about how much has had to change. And I am willing to change, because if we don't change, we will die. It is an elitist view to say if you can't afford a house in Southport, you can't be in Southport. Don't vote for me in November again, but I'm going to tell it to you how it is. We're on a dead-end path that's dependent on tourism. I sit up here and I run my mouth about jobs. Southport can't create jobs. If we had jobs where people could afford these homes, they would live in them full time. If you want to know the real problem for Southport, it's not short-term rentals. It's part-time rentals. It's the person, I say it nicely, that gets up and rattles our chain with a bow tie once in a while and then flies off to France to live most of his time while he enjoys something here. If you want to be jerked around by people like that, then go along with this mess. But ultimately, you need to stand up and tell them we're for everybody. We're for everybody. So ultimately, this short-term rental thing, I have people who come and they say, I want to retire in 10 years, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy this, and I might put it on short-term rental. And that's how they plan to pay for it. Someone that might not be $1 million person climbing the ladder, giving them a chance to live the Southport lifestyle and paying for it. You want to cut that out? Is everybody got to be rich here? So the gig is up. It's 4-2. That's how it's going to be. I appreciate you coming out. If you want to hear more, I'll be glad to talk to you. Otherwise, I've said enough.
Mr. Eisenberg, I guess you can guess what question I might ask you, but I assume you have reviewed this proposed ordinance as our city attorney.
Yes, I have reviewed it. I've gone over it with some attorneys from some other towns who have, whose towns have had short-term rental ordinances in effect for a while, and we've discussed it. I've also talked to Rebecca Badgett at the School of Government about it. So yeah, we've had some discussions about it. I'm glad you brought this up. If Mark's right, apparently somebody's going to make a motion to approve it, and I didn't know that, but until I heard you tonight. But there is a couple of things I'd like to one thing that I think is very important to clarify if somebody makes a motion to adopt this ordinance is a very, very important part of this ordinance is that you're in effect grandfathering existing short-term rentals in the residential zones. And that's a very important part because, you know, there's a lot, apparently whether it's 106 or 200, there's quite a few here. So one very important sentence that I've spent a little time today on and discussing it with some other attorneys who've been involved in the same thing is your sentence that says a short-term vacation rental in residential zoning districts must have been in operation as a short-term vacation rental prior to the date of the adoption of this ordinance. So the question then that pops out right away is, what does it mean to have been in operation? Okay, because that can be kind of vague. And from what I've determined that many towns have done, and it's in fact has been upheld from my understanding today with one of the city attorneys, is for purposes of this ordinance, in order to have been in operation prior to the adoption hereof, the short-term vacation rental must have received verifiable bookings prior to the date of the adoption of this ordinance. I didn't find any towns that actually required that a rental had been occupied, but I've been informed that it's been upheld that you can require, if they want to be grandfathered, you can require for them to show that they have verifiable bookings prior to the date you adopt it. That's one thing I'd like for you to, I think needs to be cleared up tonight, whether it's that or some other standard, what it means to be in operation. And the other thing that I noticed from some of the accommodations people and everything on their comments, and I think they make a good point, is I think several of the letters said something about, well, you know, what if we rent it, you know, for instance, from, you know, from May to September, and then we want to rent it for 4 or 5 months or 6 months, then we would lose our non-conforming status. And I don't think that's the intention there. So I would suggest also that you take care of that and maybe, and of course I may be wrong, but, and say that, you know, the rental for terms of longer than 30 days would not cause it to lose its non-conforming status. That's the two things I think that you really need to talk about.
Can I ask you a question? So this would mean if after the 180 days, if there was no short-term rentals, people could long-term rent and then continue to comply. Is that right? Did I understand you correctly?
Well, what I mean is, in effect, what you're trying to do with the legal, lawful non-conforming uses, you know, just like any non-conforming use, you normally don't want it to increase in intensity or anything like that. So you put standards in there. And by the way, 180 days is, you know, most of the ordinances I've looked at, that's the time period they used. You know, right or wrong, that's a very common time period. And what I was saying is, your ordinance doesn't regulate long-term rentals at all, anything over 30 days. So I don't know that if it's your intent that you want to punish these people who rent short-term for renting long-term. And that's what you would be doing if they rented for 6 months and then you said, oh, you did no short-term rentals for 6 months, so you've lost your status. So I'm suggesting that you may want to consider that does not trigger the 180-day period or whatever. It does not comprise that.
Just to try to clarify that more, I think I understand what you're saying, but you're suggesting that some language be inserted specifically to address the fact that a long-term rental would not be a trigger for the 6 month? Is that?
If that's the wishes of the board, I do think it needs to be addressed somehow. I mean, now if it's it depends on the intentions of the board. If the board thinks that, you know, if I rent my short-term rental from May through September, because that's the season, you know, and then somebody comes in, like they said, on an outage and wants to rent it for 6 months, that should cause me to lose my grandfather status in effect.
So you're saying this would apply only to the grandfathered ones, not the new ones?
Well, it
Yeah,
wouldn't
the
apply.
the new ones don't have any provision in there. I mean, if they're lawful, they're lawful. Yeah.
Do you have a suggestion for exactly how we would word that?
Yeah, I mean, we could add a sentence in there, for instance, for like it says, and this is just, I'm bringing up a point, it's the board's wish. Legal non-conforming short-term vacation rentals in residential zoning districts may continue in operation until such time that the use is discontinued for a period greater than 180 consecutive days. And then, for instance, and this is just off the top of my head, rental of said vacation unit for periods of greater than 30 days shall not be considered a discontinuance or something to that effect, you know, like that. I mean, if it's the intention of the board, if they rent it for 6 months, that they lose their status, then, I mean, that's your intention, because that's your decision. But that seemed to come up a lot in some of the comments from the accommodations people.
So it looks like that if we add basically 2 items to this ordinance, just what our city attorney said, rental of said vacation unit for periods greater than 30 days should not be considered a discontinuation. That's fair. I mean, if you have someone in for 6 months, or if you want to stay there 6 months and then you turn it over, that type thing, or however, because it's being rented. And the other item would be for section 3.8 for the purpose of this section.
Yeah, for purposes of this ordinance, In order to have been in operation prior to the adoption hereof, the short-term vacation rental must have received verifiable bookings prior to the date of the adoption of this ordinance. That would go as the second sentence in number 13A, if somebody's making a motion to approve this. Or you could leave it out and leave it ambiguous if you want to, but I think it's probably good, no matter which standard you adopt. I think it's good that you have some kind of criteria for what has been in operation.
Further discussion, questions
Yes,
for
I've got
council?
some comments to make, but I think before I do that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion while it's fresh and we've got it all out so we don't lose track of what we're doing. But I'd move that we approve the ordinance with the two added, with the additional language that the city attorney has recommended regarding the long-term rentals not causing a discontinuance, and the other one which escapes me at the moment.
For purposes of this ordinance, in order to have been in operation prior to the adoption hereof, the short-term vacation rental must have received verifiable bookings prior to the date.
Yes, correct.
And is your motion also to adopt the consistency
statement?
Okay.
And with that on the table, I want to say a couple of things. Okay.
Do we have a second? Okay, second by Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller. Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Just a couple of things in regards to things that have been said tonight. Clearly we do have an affordable housing issue in Southport, and clearly, in my opinion, one driver of that is the increase in short-term vacation rentals. It's an extremely lucrative endeavor, and there's obviously people buying houses strictly so they can become short-term rentals, and that is absolutely helping drive up the cost of housing in Southport. I think Mr. Lightbourne, if I can just refer back to his letter, I think he actually stated it extremely well. This ordinance does not ban short-term rentals. It provides reasonable conditions to protect the desirability of our residential areas. And that really is what this is about. It's a very simple issue. Do we want our neighborhoods turned into giant spread out hotels, or do we want to protect and nurture our community? Our neighborhoods do not all have HOAs to protect them. Some do, but most do not. I ran for alderman on a platform that included the promise to protect our neighborhoods. I was elected to exercise my judgment, informed by my education and experience, to do what I interpret as the best thing for all of Southport. And I strongly think that this ordinance is the best thing for all of Southport. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. We have a motion that includes not only the ordinance but also the consistency statement. And the ordinance includes the two additional sentences concerning verifiable bookings in terms of operation, and the fact that the vacation unit, the owner would not be penalized for renting it for greater than 30 days. The intent of that, as the city councilor said, 180 days is a standard number, but it was not meant to penalize the business. So anyway, all in favor? Show your hands. All in favor? Okay. 4. All opposed? Okay. Motion carried 4-2. Thank you. Thank you for the good discussion. Thank you all for being here and being a part of the process. Thank you, Planning Board. And we'll take a 10-minute recess. 10-minute recess. Yes. Oh, my goodness, yes. If we would, let's start back to our agenda, and we will go with the next item is the Southport Marina System Development Fees. And what I'd like to do very briefly is just read the definition. It is an upfront fee, fees charged to a new development connecting to the water sewer system for the first time. They're designed at least partially to recover the cost of infrastructure investments required to provide the water sewer system capacity needed to serve the development. It's a one-time charge. It's the state mandate, and this ordinance was passed July 3rd, 2018 at the Board of Aldermen meeting, and it was used using a state mandated formula to determine the monetary amount of the SDF. So I'll call on City Manager, Mr. Hargrove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, everyone in attendance. I sincerely mean that. So I'm going to give you a little overview of the Southport Marina System Development Fee background. Southport Marina is currently planning on adding one additional dry stack storage unit to their location on West Street. The structure has already been vetted and approved to the Planning Board and the Board of Aldermen. Southport Marina is now ready for the City of Southport to issue a building permit for the structure. The city requires Southport Marina to pay water and sewer system development fees before a building permit is issued. This is true of all new development. Mr. Robin Rose, an associate of the Southport Marina, has brought to the staff's attention that the high cost associated with the system development fees. According to 15A NCAC 02T.0014, which is basically a code of regulations addressing water, wastewater, and design flow rates, marinas with bathhouses should be assessed at a rate of 30 gallons per day per slip. The calculated cost per gallons per day for our system currently is calculated at $2.75 for water and $26.75 for sewer. Based on this criteria, the marina system development fee for a marina with a bathhouse would be a total of $191,160. A marina without a bathhouse would be assessed at a rate of 10 gallons per day per slip for a system development fee total of $63,720. Mr. Rose has been in contact with city staff, and he would like the board to consider using the number of parking spots serving the second dry stack unit to calculate the system development fee. The logic behind this is that at no point will the entire 216 slips be used on any given day. At most, the parking lot would hold 54 vehicles, so slip usage should be predicated on parking and not the number of dry slips. A system development fee based on 54 parking spaces for a marina with a bathhouse would be $47,790. A system development fee based on 54 parking spots for a marina without a bathhouse would be $15,930. How we go about this rate setting is formulas and flow rates for the system development fees were set using guidance from the state of North Carolina. McGill and Associates conducted a study for the city in 2018 and recommended these rates to the city. These rates were adopted in 2018 by ordinance. So we have a few choices here tonight that we can consider. Choice number one is to leave the rates as they are. However, the marina should be charged fiscal year 2021 rates as opposed to fiscal year 21-22 rates because we do have some culpability in holding up their building permit due to the water shortage allocation. I think this is only fair. Choice number two, we could adjust the rates to be reflective of the number of parking spaces and not the number of slips. This would require an amendment to the system development fee ordinance. Choice number three would be consider adjusting the rate chart for marinas based on peak daily usage. This would require an engineering report. If considered, the charge for this study should be paid for by the requester. At this point, you've got an overview. You've heard Mr. Rose's proposal, some of the options that you have. The rate setting calculations and formulas that we use are given to us by the state of North Carolina. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hargrove. Mr. Rose, would you like to address the board?
There you go. I'm good. I thanked him for putting me number one on the agenda, and somehow that got turned around. So that's okay. Because I literally had 10 or 12 pages of stuff I was going to get. I was going to do a deep dive, and then I kind of knew what I was walking into here. And after seeing that, I've decided just to do a short presentation. Not even a presentation, just a statement. I am Robin Rose, 606 West Street, representing Southport Marina. In June, we started a building permit process in June of 2020 and started pursuing that building permit for a dry storage building. After several hurdles, not to mention COVID and obviously the hurricane, in late March of 2021, we delivered all the information that we were told would get our building permit. Then we were informed about the water allocation issue with the state, the city, and the county. They're legit, and I think that's been cleared up since then. And Gordon called me and said we could go ahead and apply for the water line extension that we need for pressure and for quantity down at the marina for the sprinkler system to that building. Once that was passed, we were still after our building permit. I don't want to build a line unless you're going to have a building to be able to put a sprinkler system on. So after asking for the building permit, then we found out that there was a system development fee that we hadn't heard of during the whole process that we'd have to pay. So then I met with Mr. Hargrove and with Mr. Lloyd to find out how this even applies to our building. And I will tell you, they called me in. They called me in to let me know that, because I'd never heard of that during this whole process about a system development fee. I apologize to all of you for sending out this flow chart that I sent to you, because you probably didn't have a full time to take it all in based on what you guys have been through tonight. So I'm realizing that too as you go along. So I'm happy to sit with anybody and talk about that. I did receive a call from Alderman Sharkey she had questions, comments, and concerns. And Alderman Mostella, thank you for acknowledging the receipt of the document there. So I have several things I could say about that. I just say anybody that looks at those sheets right there and see what we did in 2019 at our peak year, see how much water flow we had in the basin, in the office, in the upland, and in the dry storage building, and on the west side was only 4,800 gallons per day. This methodology that was written for this new system development fee for this one building, this new building, is 6,800 gallons a day. Now everybody knows that ain't right. I mean, people that know marinas and hang around marinas know dry storage people come in and out, period, in the store. There's not 216 people that walk into that marina every day, 365 days a year, and uses 30 gallons of water. That doesn't happen. So, and I can't even say it happens if you didn't have a bathhouse at 10 gallons a day. But that being said, I think personally the methodology that I think McNeil and Associates did for the town, I think they may have tried to model that, but maybe some dry storage buildings in Florida or South Carolina, because there are buildings now that are being built with bathhouses inside the dry storage building. They also have pools there. I mean, it's the latest and greatest thing. So I'm thinking the methodology they got there is wrong. Now, we'll have to prove that out over the next 3 or 4 months if we are tasked to do so, but we need a building permit. And I'm here tonight to ask you for consideration on that. The system development fee and the methodology behind it doesn't hold water, I guess you say. With all due respect, I'm not going to, I could get deep into that tonight, but I'm not going to do it. So closing, here's what I'm asking, here's my statement. For the simple fact that we don't have any water and sewer that are functioning in that building, the Public Water and Sewer System Development Fee Act, which is General Statute 162A, 200 through 215, Article 8, should not apply in this application. So personally, we don't feel that we should be able to pay any system development fee at all because we don't have any water and sewer in that building. So I have to leave it up to the aldermen to decide, you know, where we need to take this. Obviously, I can't wait for research and engineers. We need a permit. So I'm looking for direction from you guys tonight on that. So thank you for letting me talk. Now, let me make one more. Can I make one more statement?
Please, all the time you need.
You could. I got when they showed me the spreadsheet, I got so deep in Article 8 here that I know more than I want to know about it. This is, you know, you can read it in several ways, and I'm sure you have. I don't know if Mr. Eisenberg has had a chance to go through the entire thing, but on 162A-203, authorization of system development fee says in a local government unit may adopt a system development fee for water and sewer service only in ordinance with the conditions and limitations of this article. We don't have any water and sewer in that building. That's our argument. So, and I don't want it to be an argument. I want everybody to see it, you know, as it is and what it is. And there's going to be some talk about, if there is a fee, there's going to be some talk about that bathhouse. Obviously, with a bathhouse is this much money. Without a bathhouse is that much money. I don't want to shut that bathhouse down. It's been there for 50-some years. Don't want to shut it down, but if it comes down to numbers, it's something that may have to be done. I don't want to do it. Thomas, which said, well, as we were discussing this, he said there may be a situation to where if you don't give the new dry storage customer key cards to get in that bathroom, that may be an alternative for you. I don't know if it is or not. It's up to you guys. But I do appreciate Thomas and Gordon working with me to understand this, because that was not on my radar anywhere in trying to get this building done. So thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Board comments on this? Do you have any questions for Mr. Rose or anything?
I have a question, but I have some comments.
Yeah, absolutely, I would like, let's let Mr. Hargrove just clear up one further item in terms of the water usage and that type thing. Water.
Mr. Rose, when you bring a boat in after it's been out on the water all day long, what's your standard procedure before you put it back in the dry stack unit?
Not every boat. Some boats get the bottoms sprayed off at some point. You know, we have a request to knock it off there. We will do that, but it's already in those numbers that you have. That's for the west side. I showed you some west side numbers on your chart there, and that's included in that fee there. We won't be doing that in that new building over there. We won't be using a water system in that new building.
Okay, so help me understand this. As a boat owner, one of the first things that I do when I bring my boat in is I flush my motor, and I flush it with full running water to it for a good 5 to 8 minutes to make sure all the salt's out of the motor.
Right.
And then I wash my boat down. I mean, and that's pretty much standard care procedure. So one thing that I'd like the board to understand is that while you don't have a bathroom, shower stalls in there, it's not just a static use. There is some water usage going on. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay. What happens to the water when you're finished with it? I know that sounds kind of I'm trying to ask a leading question. Where does the water go when you spray it down and flush the
It's
motor?
recycled. We almost have a no exposure certification down at the marina now. No exposure meaning it doesn't leave the property at all.
I guess what I'm asking
Evaporates.
is, do you recycle it?
Evaporates. Some we don't recycle it. No, but
Okay.
some of it evaporates, and some of it is reused to knock some of those boats off, but not much.
Okay,
Wasn't
thank you.
clean because it's dirt. Stuff that comes off is dirty. It ends up being dirt.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'll stay right here in case somebody else has got some questions.
Alderman Sharkey?
It's not a matter of questions. Mr. Rosen and I talked a bit yesterday because first thing I'll say is Southport Marina is a very good business. They have good employees. They have a good reputation. They've, been cooperative in the community and have sponsored, functions and everything. And so this is not a personal issue for me because I have to look at it objectively because I feel good about other businesses too, but I have to make sure that they all get treated in the same way as far as how we apply the ordinance. And so Mr. Rosen and I did talk quite a bit yesterday because I was trying to understand the logic with substituting car spaces versus boat slips and whether or not that would be reasonable. But it's not, because if I make that exception for the marina, then who's to say I shouldn't make that exception for a new store that has a parking lot? They only get charged by the number of parking spaces they have versus the kind of business that they run. And the recommended formula is in our spreadsheet for that business type, not based on parking spaces. It's based on use, or it's based on slips, it's based on storage units. It's a formula that we need to use and uphold with consistency to have validity in what we do. So I just have to say that unless you're willing to bring forward an engineer to do a study on the percentages of your peak usage and everything to come forward with a different valid formula, I don't see how we're going to be able to, in good conscience, I don't see how I can deviate from the worksheet that we use consistently as part of our UDO process and everything. And I apologize that it's not what you want to hear, but I think it's the fair way to do things.
Well, you and I disagreed yesterday. You see things one way and I see another. What I don't see is 216 people showing up every day, 365 days a year, using 30 gallons of water. That's what I don't see, and you won't see that either. And like I said, I'm not being ugly. I'm just trying to tell you, the methodology there does not work. Doesn't even really make sense. And I'll go one step further. And this is not poking fun or trying to poke at anybody, but the expansion of services that restaurants in this town have used in the sidewalks, in their yard, in the terrace, were they charged an additional fee, system development fee? The answer is no.
Talked about that yesterday. A lot of those restaurants couldn't serve indoors. They were serving outside. So the seating you see outside is actually a replacement for what they lost indoors.
Right. Did they
because
go
they're not
away?
sitting outdoors.
Or
And
did
even
they
if
go
they
away?
added 4, they didn't add 216.
Okay. Did they go away? It don't matter whether it's 10 or 10,000. You want to treat everybody the same way? You want to treat everybody the same way?
If they got a building permit for an expansion, then it would be calculated in on what they would have to pay. But
Okay,
they
did
didn't do a building expansion.
But so they can expand their services without paying any fees? Because that's what we're doing.
Sir, I would disagree that the scale is different. The scale is much different. If it was closer, then I would maybe be inclined to agree with you. But 4 more seats outside does not compare to 216 slips that are going to be using the resources, not maybe at the building you're building, but on site. So you're expanding the services to service more boats with within your whole facility.
So still okay for some, but not for all.
building sprinklered, the new building that's proposed?
It is, but with a dry line, there's no water in those lines.
And there never will be?
No, there will be once a year for a test.
Right. My point is that we have to provide enough water capacity to adequately operate that sprinkler system in the event that the sprinkler system is needed. We just got through paying Brunswick County, over $1 million, Gordon, to purchase additional water capacity so that we meet the state requirements for having enough water capacity to meet our needs. It's, if you want to talk about fair, I don't think it's fair for the other customers to pay for the additional capacity, future potential capacity that's going to be needed, in this case, to operate your sprinkler system, and have other people pay that $1 million that we just had to pay to the county to get that extra capacity. It's not all, and
Once again,
and it's about to use parking. There's just no correlation between parking space. There's 216 boats in there that get washed out and washed off, and motors washed out after every use. I don't see how parking spaces has any bearing on that.
we're glad to put a meter on it. I'll be glad to put a meter on if you want to put one on there at our expense. If you want to do it that way, we can do it that way.
Can I get one of the things that, and I need the city manager to correct me if I'm wrong, but when we did this study, when we were required by the state to do this study, McGill and Associates did it, and the fee structure and the formulas and the flow rate are provided by the state. They didn't go to Florida or use a different design. This information, McGill used state provided information. Is that correct? In order to do the analysis. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. It just wasn't willy-nilly. And
no, never said it was.
Oh, I know. I didn't mean it in a bad way. It's all good. But the and we, like was just pointed out, we're spending $1 million because you couldn't develop until we get this storage, right? So there is service, there is upfit that is having to come from this expansion that we have to do. The other thing that I will tell you is that because previously impact fees have come back to cost us from a class action suit, we now have, the state came up with these regulations and these statutes that we are now following. So we are following the state guidance, and I'd be reticent to rewrite this ordinance to facilitate an individual fee adjustment. That's as Alderman Sharkey said.
So
your new storage building is 200 and how many units?
there's 216 slips.
216 slips. And if you did the math, every boat was rented every day, maximum usage of water, 10 gallons to flush out a boat, no idea, no statistics.
It's on there. It's
Okay.
on their sheet there.
But so, and your before the two, what's your present capacity that you're serving?
Right now,
Yes.
there's 260 in that building as
And
well.
216, and then the other, then there's some that might use water but are on the slips.
You know, I
So
would
you're doubling your capacity
Yeah.
on the dry storage,
exactly.
and you don't really have a number of what that just 216 is costing you.
Oh, we do. We
Okay.
absolutely do.
Say that again.
We do.
Tell me what it is.
I don't have it on me,
Okay.
but I do have that.
Is there a way
It's
for
on your
us-
sheet.
Yeah.
When I sent
Okay.
you.
All right. And
It's for the west side.
Okay, and so would that number be less than what we've got?
It'll be the same.
Be the same.
It'll be
So
close to being the
So
same.
we build you at a maximum usage every day, 365 days a year.
Exactly. You know, that building is not gonna be up and 216 people jump in there day one. It's
No
just
way.
not gonna happen.
Any idea of how much is used, Dave? Any percentage idea? How much turnover you have? How many people take a boat out of dry storage? Any
Yeah, I can get that detailed information. I mean, I think we're gonna
50,
end up going
60?
there, so I can get that detailed information. I've got it. We know every boat that went out, every boat that went in, every person that went in that boathouse or bathhouse, every person that
50%?
went in there, how many times, we've got all that information. I can get that, yes.
I wish we could come up with a compromise.
Partial compromise in that we're using the current fees, not the proposed fees. So there's we're using last year's, so there's a significant savings there.
And I, it's say things. You are a good business. We do appreciate what you've done to improve the arena, and we still are struggling with the losses that are doing in terms of the hurricane. So we really are hoping to get things back. That which people think that we should own that arena.
Sure.
Anyone else for Mr. Rose or any other comments? Okay. All right, I'll be glad to entertain a motion from the board. You have several choices as outlined by the city manager.
I would just like to say that if you do number, like Gordon has got in your memo, if you changed it, for instance, to parking spaces or some other manner like that, I don't know that you can do it tonight because you're going to have to amend your ordinance. And our code requires that you see the amendment in written form. So if you do change it to parking spaces or some other manner of calculating it, I think we would have to do that at a later meeting because it will take an ordinance amendment because this is set in an ordinance. Okay.
Make a motion that we save Southport Marina $72,000 by charging the 2021 system development fee rather than the 21-22 system development fee.
Alderman, would you say that first motion again so I can...
I make a motion that we save Southport Marina $72,000 by charging them a system development fee equal to the amount of the 2021 fee structure, which would be $191,160 instead of the 21-22 development fee.
That's with the bathhouse. It should be without the bathhouse.
Okay.
I don't mean to correct you, but just I see what you're looking at.
That's fine. Then we'll save them $24,000
Exactly.
and go with
Yes.
the $63,720.
I knew what you meant. I just wanted to clarify.
It was
so
supposed to
thank
be, I
you.
thought it was supposed to be with the bathhouse. Did I? Oh, you're going
It
to
doesn't
eliminate
have
the
a
bathhouse?
We'll have to close it down if you so choose to go that way. That thing's been there for 50 years. No. I thought she said to close.
Apply to what you have. It applies to the new building.
Okay, we don't have a bathhouse in no building.
That's right. That's what we wanted to confirm.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's less cost.
Okay, I thought she did close it.
Less cost.
Rose to shut down his original bathhouse with the original stack unit. We're just trying to come to the understanding of whether he's going to have a bathhouse associated with the second dry stack unit, and that's where you're looking at your different categories here. Is he going to provide a bathhouse services for the customers of the second dry stack storage unit or not? And if he's not, then he gets charged a system development fee associated with the marina without bathhouse. And he would just not give a fob to get into the other bathhouse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's.
And there are ways that we can monitor that, because all of a sudden we know that he's using average 4,800 gallons a day. If all of a sudden we're seeing 10,000 gallons of use a day, then that will start a conversation about that particular. I mean, it would be fairly simple to keep track of.
What I did find out before, y'all, all of your time, well, you may have been here, Johnny, but we had some serious leaks down there before we may have busted into winter time, and next thing you know, we come in there and we've used up $10,000 worth of water, you know what I mean? So if you see something jump up like that, we want to be the first to know because there's a leak.
So does that mean that the patrons of that boathouse can't use the bathroom at your facility? What does that mean? With the bathhouse?
Yeah, the bathhouse. What are you asking?
So they can't use your facilities? You're gonna those boat people can, but these boat people can't. Is that what we're saying? I just want to.
I think that's what.
That's what y'all.
Saying.
That's the. Okay, I just didn't.
To the customers of that second unit, then we can monitor that to make sure that that's not happening.
Look, can you tell me the difference between with and without? Was it 191 and 64? Is that what it was?
63,000 on the old, the current fee, not the new one. Marinas without a bathhouse was 63,000. On the new fee, marina without a bathhouse was 87,000. So it's a savings of, as Alderman Allen said, 24,000.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking.
The old.
Yeah, 191 without the bathhouse is what? 63. Okay, so now we're talking about $130,000 plus we're getting ready to spend $70,000 plus extending that water line. That's $200,000. I can't afford to keep that bathhouse open. So
It's only, if you can satisfy your customers, I don't know that we really care whether you have a bathhouse.
right. Well, you're safe. It's the new people in the new building not going to be able to use that bathroom based on this formula. Not really, but in $200,000, I'm pretty sure of it. Yeah. In the 70, we're going to spend extending that pipe. So,
Well, that's anyway, isn't it?
say again.
That extension happens anyway, right? You're
It
extending the
happens
pipe.
because we have to have but there's
You have to have sewer.
there's
You have to have
once again,
sprinkler.
You're exactly right. But you know what that does? That gives the city of Southport better quality water with that loop. You've had your staff testify to that. You also save on manpower because you don't have to have those firemen going in there blowing off the end of that line like they've been doing for longer than we've been living probably. How many thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons got wasted in that ditch because they had to go blow off that line? We're stopping that by putting that loop line in. So it helps the city of Southport too.
I guess my question, the only question I've got is, so if you decide based on your observation that it's somehow now they're using the bathhouse, then do you go back and say you owe us 120,000? I mean, what does that mean? What does that even mean? Okay.
gonna see that. Yeah, but you're not gonna see that. If you see any increase, there'll be another reason other than those people in that building. Yeah, it's true. True, very true.
So if you don't have the bathhouse and your folks can't use the existing bathhouse that you have, where are they gonna go?
They could walk in our office if they wanted to. If somebody had to go to the bathroom, normally people get on their boat, they pull up, they get out of their car, they get on their boat, and they get gone. That's normally how that happens. But, I mean, if it comes to it, there can be porta-johns put over there. You know, we've even looked at one of those, you know, that thing you bring out for special events that are air conditioned. Even looked at doing that. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have a motion by Alderman Allen. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Alderman Sharkey. Any further discussion? Yes. It is marina without the bathhouse at last year's rate, saving $24,000 to the marina.
We're basically only voting on getting last year's rates because we kind of have.
We held them up, yes.
Approving which rate, they're making that, staff's making that decision.
He's making that decision.
That's what I'm saying, he's
Yeah.
making that decision. We're just saying he's getting his last year's rates.
He's getting last year's rates.
Right, because we held them up. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood.
Let me make sure I
Correct.
understand too. That ain't, the bathhouse stays open to the customers that are there now, right? And we don't
Yes.
give the card to the people that are in the new drug stores, okay? I
Correct.
just wanted to understand that. Thanks.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, Mr. Rose, absolutely.
When can I get my building permit?
I didn't hear you.
When can I get my building permit?
Mr. Lloyd, when can he get his building permit?
I'd like to answer that. I'd like to
Okay.
wait. When can you give me a check?
If that's the answer, it'll be next week.
Give you a building permit next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent discussion. Thank you. All right. Let me know if I'm out of order, but I think the public hearing concerning the annexation of 1147 North Caswell Avenue, the date of the public hearing was set at the last Board of Aldermen meeting for today, July 8th. I hereby declare this public hearing open, and I call on Development Services Director, Mr. Thomas Lloyd.
All right, so this is a request from Terry and Sue Finch, and they are at 1147 North Caswell, as the mayor said, and it is a .14 acre tract on North Caswell Avenue. Let's see here. We found that the description is adequate to locate the property, the meets and bounds description. The search of the tax records do show that the owner is Mr. and Mrs. Finch. They have signed the petition, and the property is currently contiguous to the existing city limits, so they're going for a contiguous annexation. The city clerk has determined it as sufficient, and we did notice this in the June 23rd edition of the pilot in compliance with the general statutes for contiguous annexations. The folks here are wanting to annex so they can have service for water and sewer. So the board must now open the public hearing and consider this annexation petition, and which you've already done. So if there's any questions about the property itself, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Any public comment during our public hearing? Okay, I will declare the public hearing closed, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the ordinance and the annexation of 47. I forgot to write down the 7 on notes. 1147 North Caswell Avenue into the city. Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Our next item will be the public hearing. This is a rezoning phase 2. We've already rezoned properties on North Caswell Avenue from multifamily to R10 to better facilitate the use of this property. Map is in your agenda packet, and this is 1133, 1147, and 1151 North Caswell Avenue. I declare the public hearing open and call on Development Services Director Thomas Lloyd.
All right, so the mayor already gave a pretty good summary of this. This would be for 3 additional properties. We've heard from all of these folks, and they've signed a form saying that they do wish to be rezoned to R10. The 2 properties directly across the street and the properties behind those just got rezoned recently last month. So this is just a continuation of that process. The planning board reviewed the proposed zoning map amendment at the June 15th planning board meeting, and they voted to recommend approval of the zoning map amendment. Their statement of consistency is attached. Are there any questions from anyone?
Thomas, can you say anything about the parcel located between 1133 and 1147? Is there some reason that, have they been approached, or can you find them? Are they not in favor, or what's their story?
So those folks are not in favor of it.
A vacant parcel currently?
It is. Mm-hmm.
How many of those folks were there?
In total, well, they're the only people that have opposed it in this area of it. The 3 that are highlighted were all interested in it because of how small the lots are, and they wouldn't really be able to do anything with it otherwise.
Other comments? Anyone from the public that would like to speak? Okay. Otherwise, I declare this public hearing closed, and I'll entertain a motion to adopt the land use consistency statement and approve the zoning map amendment.
Move.
Motion by Alderman Sharkey and second by Mr. Allen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Our next item, this is a resolution approving the financial terms with Truist Bank. It concerns the fire department budget, our 2 vehicles, and I'll call on Chief Charles Drew.
Just asking for approval of the resolution. We put out, and I think there were 3 banks that bid on the financing, and Truist came in with the lowest financing terms, and I don't have it in front of me. I think it's like 1 point some percent. It's less than 2%. And I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for Chief Drew? I will entertain a motion. Motion to approve the resolution by Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lombardi. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Committee reports. Alderman Allen? Mr. Spencer?
ABC board is, the building for the additional storage is underway and things are going well. And I think they were included in the packet.
Alderman Sharkey.
I'll just make a mention about rates. Rate committee at a very short meeting, we need more information from Melanie Trexler, the financial officer, to get into any depth on how we're going to make adjustments to the water and sewer rates, but they will change. Just to say that, just to put it out there, they're going to have to change.
Madam Lowe Davis.
The Forestry Committee meets on the second Tuesday, so that's next Tuesday, at 5 o'clock at Indian Trail. Everyone's invited. That's it.
Lombardi. Alderman Marsteller.
The Streetlight Committee report. The Streetlight Committee has submitted the updated draft to our city attorney for review, and once this process is complete, the proposed policy will be posted on the city website to give citizens an opportunity to review the recommendations in preparation for public input before it's considered for adoption by the board. In the meantime, citizens may reach out to Alderman Sharkey, Alderman Davis, or myself with any additional questions or concerns regarding the streetlight policy. And just as a reminder, the planning board will meet at its regularly scheduled time next Thursday at 6 p.m. here in the community building.
Thank you. Manager's report.
I have nothing at this time.
Okay, Mayor's comments. I'm going to be very brief. First of all, thank you all for this meeting tonight. Thank you for being here and for your work. It was a long meeting. It was at times a difficult process, but I appreciate the hard work that was done by the planning board and the board of aldermen and city staff. And thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Thank you, city attorney, and thank you, Manager. In terms of July 4th, it was a wonderful day. Started out at the Southport Baptist Church, Pastor Devin Varnum. They honored the first responders, and our chiefs were there, and they looked so wonderful in their uniforms, and thank you, gentlemen, for being there. That was a wonderful service, and I was honored to be there as well. Then we went to the flag-raising ceremony on the garrison on Fort Johnston, and that was followed by the reading of the Declaration of the Independence. The musket was fired a couple of times. The cannon was fired a couple of times. The garrison looked beautiful. Again, thank you, Tom Stanley, and thank you, Tish, and the Southport Garden Club. It just red, white, and blue, spectacular. And then that same day, July 4th, the flotilla, the July 4th flotilla at the Cape Fear Yacht Club, and there was just a wonderful, gentle, cool breeze, which is unusual, salubrious breeze for Southport, very unusual. And the Potter Shrimp Boat led the way in red, white, and blue, and it was just marvelous. So all week, our city was engulfed with people, locals, tourists, lots of family reunions, and I know that the tourists were here because I saw a number of them this past weekend. They're all very pleasant. Next year, July 4th, 2022, it's going to be on a Monday. Our parade will return. Our fireworks will return. And everything in between. The city hosts the festival. The North Carolina 4th of July Festival is a separate committee under the auspices of the Southport Oak Island Chamber of Commerce. My only input I thought would be, what time do I show up to ride in the parade? So it has really been 2 difficult years, and I appreciate everyone's patience in that regard. The festival is returning to Southport, and I thank Chief Drew for getting that message out. Thank you. The planning is by the committee, so we're fortunate that next year Randy Jones, Southport native, head of our Department of Tourism, is the festival committee chair. In terms of hurricane preparedness, we got lucky this time. Stay vigilant. I want to appreciate the calls this morning that I received thanking the city for the alert that went out on Southport Connected. That's been just such a good thing for our city and our citizens. So thank you for that. COVID-19, we're seeing cases again, so if you're not already vaccinated, if your family, friends not vaccinated, please tell them to take their best shot. It's a preventable disease, and cases are rising because people are not vaccinated. infrastructure, house, street, sewer project to potholes. We're moving forward. So I appreciate that, City Manager, especially on Brown and Clarendon. It's looking much better, so thank you. And I will end on July 3rd. I celebrated my 36th year as an ER doctor at Dozier Memorial Hospital. So you don't have to clap. You don't have to clap. No, that's not why I said it. The point of the story was that, so I've celebrated many July 4ths in Southport, and I'm glad that it's coming back next year. So thank you. Staff reports, they are in your agenda packet. Board comments. Mr. Allen.
The only comment I have is 36 years. Well, you're old.
85. So I'm 6-decade double digits. Spencer.
I mentioned someone in a bow tie earlier, and it was definitely not directed at you, because I love your bow ties and I love your chucks.
I appreciate that.
And that is something that's been consistent for as long as I have known you to be in this town. I saw you at we met in Leland, I believe. You were taking pictures of a campaign. You've been involved in our community, and by no way did I want to even incur that you are a part-timer. You are established and family and heritage, and I do appreciate it. So I want to make it clear that that was not directed at you. Short-term rental is not our enemy. It is the fact that people are buying $1 million homes and only living here 3 months out of the year puts us in a bind, because they only use their resources a very short period of time. And it doesn't promote, as the prices go up, it doesn't promote families and neighborhoods. And it is frustrating. So Southport will never be what I saw it as, a place where everybody had a home and everybody had a job, and we weren't really that much difference. It really has changed. Even I know that if we've got to move forward, if we're going to be a tourist economy, we've got to do the things that involve the tourist. Every time we come up with an opportunity that provides for jobs, someone away from here says, no Port Southport, or whatever. I don't know what all the right answers are, but I do know that we can die on the vine if we don't face the future. It is not the home that my father had when he was a young man. It's not what I had, but it is a good place, and there are good people. And I told the people that were here, I appreciate them being here. It's tough. It's tough to stay here because it's not. It's pretty, but it's not easy. So I want to make it clear that short-term rental is not our enemy. It's money that can buy property and live here half the time, and how we're going to pay for the water and the power and the infrastructure. How are the people that actually live here all the time from here going to keep up? And that's why I get so frustrated. And yeah, I'm mad, and it hurts. So I appreciate y'all coming to the Baptist Church on the 4th of July. It was a time where we actually all got to sit together and weren't reprimanded by and there was no business discussed, but I was proud to sit in the group with you and for y'all to come to my church. And I put a big burden on my preacher, because I say he's my preacher. Don't blame him. It's not his fault. So anyways, God bless you all. Thank you for coming out tonight and expressing your opinions.
Thank you for letting me speak. Earlier this evening, I know I may have made you uncomfortable, and you may have felt like I was being disrespectful, and I apologize, but I still believe that I had the right to ask for something to be added to the agenda. And my request is really just to expand the exposure that all the aldermen get to have to the public, and make sure that we know that this is our business meeting for the citizens that we serve. And so we may all want to have a little different take on it from month to month. And that policy allowed for that in the past, as far as who we invite to do invocation, and maybe the comments that we make at the opening. And that has changed, and I don't know if it was for the better, just because it diminishes our ability to interact with staff, as far as, you know, working on an agenda, and also representing our citizens and having them feel like they're part of our meetings and that they have connections to us. So I still stand by my request, and if we can entertain that to be incorporated in the future, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderman Sharkey, for your comments. Alderman Davis.
Just this, I'd like our first responders to know that the only reason I was not at the Baptist church with you was that I was in at St. Mark's in Wilmington doing a service there. So my heart was with you.
As it always is. Mr. Lombardi.
Yeah, Laura, I'd like to know a little more about what you're proposing, because I was kind of confused. So if you can, I don't know anything about it, so I'd like to know more about it so that we can talk about it.
Okay, it was something that was in existence when you were elected. And so the reference I was looking at was the listing of, you know, Alderman of the Month schedule, whereas the responsibility at the alderman meetings was to do welcome and invocations and make announcements relevant to what was going on at the meeting, and that's really it. But it gave people, like I said, that exposure to us a little more. We interacted with our citizens a little bit differently, I think, and for me, I would be inviting, you know, different pastors and stuff like that than I think we see sometimes here at the meetings, to try to get that diversity element in our representation, and like I said, that inclusion. Try to include our citizens as best we can, and that's all. I thought it was a good policy. Other people seem to be comfortable with it in the past. If you don't want to do it, you could always ask somebody to fill in for you.
Okay, thanks.
Mosteller.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. One is I had the good fortune to spend some time with Chief Coring last Saturday observing the July 3rd festivities around town. While I was with the chief, a call came in and there was an alligator in someone's front yard in Southport Way. The chief took the call and I rode along. Along the way, another call came in that an egret was tangled up in fishing line at the city pier in Waterfront Park. The chief referred that call to our Animal Protective Services officer, Kate Marshall. Officer Marshall is also a certified wildlife control agent. After the chief relocated the young alligator to the nearest pond, we headed to the city pier. The situation when we arrived at the city pier wasn't quite as expected. Officer Marshall was listening to a bystander explaining she and some others had been feeding the egret shrimp all morning or during the morning, and that the bird had then saw a shrimp laying on the dock connected to a fishing pole and unfortunately swallowed the shrimp along with the hook. This story doesn't end well for the bird. The guy cut the line and there was no way for Officer Marshall to catch the bird. This is just one example, and there are others, feeding wild animals and creating inappropriate interactions with wildlife. Our Animal Protective Services officer, Kate Marshall, and Chief Coring are doing an excellent job of continuing to educate our community about the wildlife that lives among us. But we have a lot of visitors that may not be familiar with wildlife up close and may need reminding that direct human interaction is inappropriate. as other environmentally sensitive communities, as in other environmentally sensitive communities, it could be helpful to create signage that informs our visitors to coexist and support the wildlife around us by not feeding or interfering with their habits, reminding us all we can best help Mother Nature do her job by letting wildlife stay wild. So I'd like to put that out there. And then lastly, but I just wanted to say one thing about short-term rentals. You know, it is a difficult conversation, and there's a lot of interests in play. And don't think for 1 minute that anyone at this table takes it lightly at all. It is a thoughtful process, and I just want anybody that's still listening on the video to know that we thought long and hard about it. So anyway, and lastly, our Assistant Director of Communications, Lisa Anderson, has created a new community emergency kit, info kit. These kits contain helpful information from FEMA that cover a variety of severe weather scenarios such as hurricanes, flooding, lighting, power outages before, during, and after storm events. There are checklists to help us prepare our home, our family, and our pets for an emergency, and a list of trusted resources to track weather conditions. There is also information that discusses flood insurance. There is information on Southport Connect, and the resources available are on the city website. You can pick up, anybody that's still listening out there, can pick up your very own kit at either City Hall, the Fire Department headquarters, the Harper Library, and we'll have them here at the monthly board meetings. Again, this is special thanks to our Assistant Director of Communications, Lisa Anderson, for putting this information together. We just have amazing staff in Southport for the city that work for the city and are always stepping it up one more notch up. So this is just amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely. No time limit.
Along the meeting, but I had not heard of Alderman of the Month until Alderman Sharkey brought it up. And for the sake of the public, I want to be sure that there's no misunderstanding that this is an honor, that there's a crown, that there's a prize or a plaque that goes with it. It's a lot of work, right? I mean, I'd never heard of it till tonight, so I assume that we're just going to work hard.
Yeah, there's not going to be an Alderman of the Month. You have a new mayor, you have a new board, and I talked this over with Bruce Oakley, and that's one of the things I said. I felt like, let's just do the meetings. I've seen meetings under Mayor Robert Howard, and that's what I was trying to exemplify. And during that time, there was not an Alderman of the Month or anything. It was a very business meeting, and the mayor ran the meeting and that type of thing. So that's what I was trying to emulate, not to keep an alderman from speaking or interacting with staff. I'm sure, Alderman Sharkey, you see the staff more than I do at times. So that was not the purpose of it. And but I just felt like it was a more business-like meeting. And as I say, the three aldermen that were elected were unaware of it. So, and Mr. Oakley had agreed as well. So that's
no crown.
No crowns. Any further comments? Okay. Thank you. Excellent comments from everyone. Excellent meeting. I appreciate your patience. Thank you for your hard work. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? All right. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. All in favor? Aye.